We're going to start the meeting. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Strategic Growth Council. It is great to see so many people here. We have many people commenting today, and we're going to have to cut comments down, I think, a little bit because of that. But Mike was just reminding me that the Gettysburg Address was only about 2.5 minutes long, so I think that we can get out a lot of content in a short amount of time. So thank you for that. That was good. And ideally not start a war while we're doing it. I'm going to do the ask for the roll call from, and first let me say before I do that, comment cards, if you have not already submitted one, Sandra over there, who will raise her hand, is collecting the comment cards. Roll call. There's a button on the top of the microphone.
If the alternates could just introduce themselves. I'm going to be doing this by secretary and council member. So Director Gordon.
Here.
Michael Fladd.
Here.
Secretary Blumenfeld.
Yeah.
Nicole Capritz. Secretary Crowfoot.
Here.
Bob Fisher. Secretary Galley.
Here.
Secretary Kim.
Darwin Musavi, Deputy Secretary for Environmental Policy, here for David Kim.
Secretary Podesta.
Melinda Grant, Undersecretary to the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, here on behalf of Secretary Podesta.
And Secretary Ross.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Let us do the approval of minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a motion on that? Any seconds?
Second.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention. So Mike's abstaining, Darwin abstaining, Secretary Galley abstaining. Great, thank you. Motion passes. And thanks again for those who prepare the minutes because they're always really helpful. We will do our usual council member updates where people can share stuff that they're working on at their agencies or outside that is relevant and that they want others to hear about. So anybody have updates that they want to share? Was that possible? Secretary Galley, you have updates?
Sure. I mean, it's relevant. I think broadly speaking, we continue the Health and Human Services Agency to pursue the governor's direction on a master plan on aging, which I think is relevant because we're talking about sort of built environment for seniors, understanding how we allow our older Californians in the growing number to really stay in place, have meaning, purpose in their communities, and everything from housing to workforce issues and transportation come up. So I think relevant to the group, and I will keep on bringing it up and any other updates. And then not sure if this touches the lives of those in the room as strongly as some of the groups I meet with on a daily basis, but the Department of Healthcare Services that runs our Medicaid program for the state, which I see as one of the biggest equity tools for California, is just announced and working on what they call as the Kalam Proposal, which is how we're going to reform Medicaid over the next 5 years, with the real focus on some of the drivers that around social determinants of health, things like housing, transportation, food, and access to those important elements that, you know, as people say, food is medicine, and just this notion that we can do more through the Medicaid program to support people to have sort of upstream interventions around these social determinants. And you'll see that as a heavy dose of work, and I bring it up here, not that you're going to peel through the 166-page document outlining the proposal, but just if you see it in the news or it's something that the governor talks about, because I think there's some enthusiasm there around this project, that it does have this clear nexus for vulnerable populations to some of the core things that I think this council really thinks about with our investments and our larger view of the ecosystem that we're in charge of.
That's great and very relevant. Thank you so much, Secretary Galley. Jared, Secretary Blumenfeld, sorry.
Just wanted to give an update from the last meeting where there was a question about Cal and Virus Green, and just to kind of walk through a teeny bit where we are on that. So the current version of Enviroscreen is 3.0, and I'll talk in a second about some of the refinements that we took on as a result of listening to members of the public, legislators, and others about potential things that could improve on Enviroscreen. Just to be clear, I think there's often confusion about what Enviroscreen is and is not. It's really not intended as a tool to capture disadvantage for all purposes. So often it's used as, well, is it just about income? Is it just about this thing? It's really a composite of many different factors that were used really as a screening and tool by which to determine where resources should go. It's definitely the most used screening tool in the state, so it's taken on a level of importance to indicate the community's relative disadvantage. To Secretary Galley's point, really, it does internalize a lot of environmental health indicators, and that's one of the largest goals, as well as pollution and socioeconomic burdens. So in terms of refinements and part of the benefit of being able to give this update is I think a lot of people are operating on what the very, very first version of Enviroscreen is, and there's been a lot of refinement. So one of the most important ones as it relates to SGC is that in the latest version, housing burden indicator that accounts for the number of families in a given census tract paying significant portions of their monthly income in housing expenses was added as a screen. We also added an indicator tracking cardiovascular disease as a contributor to one's vulnerability to suffer risks associated with pollution sources. We're currently considering refinements and changes we'd like to make to the next version, which will come out in 2020, which will be version 4.0. We're looking at refinements related to lead exposure and the layering of other vulnerability drivers like wildfire risk. So wildfire risk is something we've heard a lot about, and that will be hopefully part of the next version. So OEHA, which is the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, is the entity that works on Enviroscreen. If members of the public or folks listening, or particularly people on the dais and their staff are interested in contributing to 4.0 and understanding that in more depth, we can offer. We're going to have meetings, but we can also set up a separate meeting if anyone is interested. So thank you.
That is a great update. Thank you, because that is absolutely a tool that's used across many, many of the programs that we all work on, including at SGC. And just a quick note on the housing burden, which is great. And we can talk more about this, but considering adding transportation burden to that. So the housing plus transportation budget implication is in there because it's increasingly a thing. So we can talk more about that, but great update. Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot.
Well, I would just say at a very broad level, Jared and I had an opportunity to help represent our broad climate team within the Newsom administration last week at the UN's Conference of Parties discussion on climate change. And the core of that discussion is really a negotiation among nation states around reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But California plays a really outsized role as a subnational government in that, as really a model of how to grow our economy while reducing climate emissions. And we were among a bunch of provinces and states, subnational governments who are really leading the way. I think Jared explained that, national leadership among, nations is necessary, but ultimately not sufficient to get where we need to go. And then I would just say, relevant to in this room, because we have a lot of folks here who are interested in the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program, or SALK, there's real momentum internationally for nature-based solutions. We use the term natural and working lands in California. I was quite excited to actually learn a lot about what other places around the world are doing as it relates to sustainable agriculture and forestry and just essentially preservation of nature for climate benefits, both emission reductions and resilience. And then I would just make an announcement closer to home, which is tomorrow we'll kick off an effort in our agency, the so-called Cutting Green Tape Initiative, specifically focused on how we do environmental restoration more quickly, effectively, and ultimately cheaper than we can right now. As we realize the impacts of climate change and environmental degradation, we realize we have to get this environmental restoration work done quicker. So we're pulling together a broad set of stakeholders over the next several months to really talk about permitting efficiencies, funding efficiencies, to be able to do that work more effectively. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you, and thanks for going to Madrid and representing us. Thanks for going all the way to Spain. I know that was challenging.
Sounds a lot better than it.
I know. I've been to them. I know what you mean.
In this room for
Absolutely.
5 days without.
Right. Right, exactly. Windowless conference rooms in Spain. Secretary Ross.
I just wanted to touch very briefly on our methane reduction program. Since the last meeting, we released a considerable amount of money, which will move the state to more than 25% of our stated goal of 40% reduction in methane with a combination of dairy digesters and alternative manure management practices. And we had a list of folks that are still interested. So as the funds roll in, that's a very helpful program. And to know that we've moved that far on that big goal, which at the time was very intimidating, and it still is. And then I don't want to get ahead of myself, but any day, if not any moment now, we'll be putting out our next request for a statement of funding available for the next round of Healthy Soils. And I really want people in this room who care about that program to read it very carefully, because we've made some significant changes to the application process that we think will help streamline it and make it more user-friendly. And I will also say that just based on the latest round of sweep requests that closed last night, we had over 380 applications, many from disadvantaged communities, which I think is a testament to the investment this council has made in technical assistance and having those UC cooperative community educators out there talking climate smart agriculture and providing hands-on assistance to doing the applications and know how to get those funds to help our many farmers in these communities. It's pretty exciting to see the payoff start to happen. So thank you, Strategic Growth Council.
That's awesome. Thank you. It's that methane goal. That's really impressive that you're making those strides. Anyone else on the end of Melanie? Anybody? Do you have any updates from you guys?
Sure, I can give a quick update on the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program, which I think at the last meeting, Secretary Kim announced we had done some guideline updates, but since then the program has gone out for a call for projects. We have applications due mid-January, and we've had about 30 or so kind of pre-application meetings that are expecting a robust set of projects across the state. There's about $500 million available in this round of funding, so it's a significant investment. And a lot of these projects end up being partners to TCC and HSC programs through the SGC as well, so they're a critical part of the overall GGF portfolio.
Thank you. It's always so inspiring to hear all the things that are happening across the agencies that all relate to strategic growth. Really quickly from OPR, a couple of interesting things. One is just highlighting again the importance of health in all of the conversations that we have around climate and land use. Our OPR runs, as some folks know, a precision medicine team that's working very closely with the Surgeon General's office on a RFP that was just released for $9 million in adverse childhood experiences, which is essentially is sort of, there's a set of experiences that lead to trauma in children that can have lifetime implications on health, mental health, and just people's ability to live their lives, and also on health costs. And there is a strong connection, as folks know, I think, between many of the pollution issues we talk about, but also climate impacts like wildfires and adverse childhood experiences. And so that's an area where there's a lot of overlap with the agendas all of us are working on, and we've worked very closely with her office. OPR also is updating guidance to local governments on wildfire hazard area planning, which is very top of mind to everybody. So looking at land use planning strategies to reduce wildfire risk, so looking not just at sort of short-term prevention, but long-term resilience. And that's an interagency group with many of the people up here on, as well as OES and the PUC. Working on that, obviously CAL FIRE, and will be very, I think, top of mind going into the next year in terms of how people are thinking about planning. And then just wanted to say from a sort of a overall governor and government perspective, folks know, I think that the budget, the governor's budget is due to the legislature on January 10th. So lots and lots and lots of focus on the budget going on across all of the agencies. And I think that there is a really strong commitment of all of us up here who are all working together very closely on really focusing on some of the big issues that we talk about in the Strategic Growth Council all the time, whether that's health and health impacts, transportation and those impacts, or land use and its contribution to our climate goals. So all of those are really big focuses in the budget, and we are all working very hard to deliver it on time. I'm going to leave it at that, although there's so many other things we could talk about because lots and lots of cool stuff is happening. But we need to keep doing more, as Wade and Jared just were reminded at the Conference of the Parties. It's one of the big takeaways from that meeting was that people are not meeting their goals, and it's we just have to keep being what we're doing what we're doing, and showing leadership and driving forward and doing integrated planning and working as hard as we can on meeting these goals in a way that keeps our economy strong and looks out for folks in disadvantaged communities as well as those vulnerable communities. The last thing I'll say is that, of course, ICARP, the Integrated Resilience Planning Group that is run out of OPR, has a definition of vulnerable communities, which is not exactly the same as the definition of disadvantaged communities, and a good reminder that there are many layers to this question of who's most affected by these policies. So I definitely encourage people to get involved in the Kalam Proposal conversation because that one is really important and drives a lot of policy. All right. I'm going to move on. Thank you. I always find these updates really helpful. We are in the position of recognizing someone who is not here, which is very sad. But I think folks know that Bob Fisher has been a member of the Strategic Growth Council for 10 years, so long before I've been a member of it, or many of us have been a member of it. And really, even in the meetings I've been in, has just shown just institutional knowledge, a commitment to the state, really was a fantastic addition. We're really, really sad to lose him. He is now the acting CEO of the Gap company, so kind of a big job. And I guess why he's not here, he has to run a giant multinational company. But really sad to lose him. And I wanted Louise, I know Louise has a few words to say, including a letter from the governor. So over to you.
Great. Yes. Well, we are very sad to to not have Bob here today, but definitely wanted to take an opportunity to thank him publicly for his commitment to the council. He was here when he was the only public member. So if folks remember when the Strategic Growth Council was formed, we still had an business transportation and housing agency. A CDFA was not up here on the dais, and we had a single public member. And so he really has seen the council through from our initial planning grants, which actually we'll revisit just in a moment, but through to the growth and development of the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, the Salk program, TCC, the Climate Change Research Program, our technical assistance work, and so really has been here across 3 administrations to see this council through. And as I understand, and maybe it's urban legend, is this was the request, this is what he wanted to do when working with Schwarzenegger. He said he wanted to be on the Strategic Growth Council, and I think he just showed a real commitment in the work that he did. So I think we just really want to thank him for all of the support. And so we did get a letter from Governor Newsom, which I'll just read so folks can hear it. Dear Bob, please accept my sincere thanks for your service on the California Strategic Growth Council and my best wishes for your final meeting. Having served as the gubernatorial appointee to the council since its creation a decade ago, you have played a vital role in the growth and development of the council, its staff, and its investment programs. You have been integral not only to the success of the council, but to the development of its newest members, providing critical mentorship to those following in your footsteps. Our great state has been made stronger thanks to your contributions, and we are fortunate to have benefited from your exceptional leadership and deep commitment to public service. Thank you for your dedicated efforts to improving the lives of Californians. I wish you the best. Sincerely, Gavin Newsom. And then I will just hold up for everyone to see. There is a personal handwritten note at the bottom that says, Bob, why are you leaving? Let me know what else you're interested in. So hopefully we will have Bob Fisher back to help us tackle more problems in the future. We also have a small token that we will present to him and hopefully meet with him to glean his final pearls of wisdom to pass on to us as we continue this work. So.
Thank you, and I know he feels the love from everyone in the room. It's really too bad that he couldn't be here, but if you see Bob Fisher, thank him for his service to the council, which really was true public service from a truly public-spirited guy. So thank you for that. Our next item is a consent calendar item, and I don't know who was here at the first meeting I ever chaired, but I didn't understand consent calendar items at that meeting, and now I have been schooled in the consent calendar. So this, just as a reminder, everybody else, is an item that we do not vote on. There is public comment available, although I didn't get any cards for this. But so essentially, this is an item directing staff to prepare and release a request for proposals to solicit applications for planning grants in wildfire-affected communities, making approximately $750,000 in reappropriated Prop 84 funds available to communities. And I would just ask Louise if you would just give us a little context to remind us all what that means.
Yes, so Proposition 84 was passed in 2006. This was money that went out to a number of natural resource and community planning activities. And this is actually the funding that the Strategic Growth Council used to do its first rounds of funding as a body, where we put out sustainable communities planning grants to local governments and also support to MPOs. Over time with these programs, if a grantee is unable to execute a grant or complete the work, money will revert back to the state and it can be reappropriated. So each year, SGC, and we partner with the Department of Conservation actually in the implementation of this program, has some amount of money that is reappropriated, which we have been recirculating back out to communities to support planning initiatives. In the past, we've used this also to support TCC planning grants. We've done a series of best practice pilots working with local governments and Civic Spark to really document some planning best practices. This money is probably one of the last rounds that we will get coming back. And what we've been doing is working with the Office of Planning and Research's Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resiliency Program, which has an interagency collaboration component to it, as well as operation of development of the Adaptation Clearinghouse and the Department of Conservation to administer these funds. A challenge is often this money, as it comes back, is the local assistance dollars without administrative money still attached to it. So we have to creatively work it into some of our programs. Our goal here is to put this money back out, working with ICARP to design and administer the program, and with DOC as well, to support land use planning to advance adaptation and resilience in communities that have been affected by wildfire. And so this can include activities such as updating general plans to support resilient recovery, to do innovative recovery activities, to really support vulnerable communities, and just to build local and regional capacity. We're looking at making grants a maximum of $250,000. Our goal here, and the reason we put this on the consent calendar, is really to be able to get the money out fairly quickly to communities that need it. Our intention is to run a solicitation and come back to the council with a recommended awards, ideally in April, though we're still finalizing the timeline where everyone can fit it into the workflows.
Great, thank you. And obviously wildfires, an important area to focus on. All right, so since we don't get to vote on that, I find these consent calendar items so confusing. Doug knows that I find them very confusing. We should do the vote. See, this is why it's so confusing. I find we don't have discussion. God, yeah, someday I will understand this specific thing, which I find very hard. Okay, we are going to vote on it. Thank you, Doug. So let's do a roll call just because it's easier.
Aye.
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 Linda, Melissa, it's totally fine. Aye.
Great. So staff is duly directed.
Direction well. So,
If only we could have votes on every direction to everything. That would be great. Thank you, and thanks for being patient with me on the these Robert's Rules issues. We're going to move to the Executive Director report. So Louise can just keep standing there and give us a report.
Great. So I will try to be brief with this and then also set a little context for the presentations that we'll have today. One, I will say, I feel like people thought this was our holiday party. This is a wonderful crowd that we have, and so I don't want to stand in the way of other people engaging in our meeting. I will provide a few quick, it could be, yeah. This is, it's like Madrid, yeah.
It's the UN's version of a holiday party.
So I'll do a few quick staffing updates. We do have a lot of new additions and a few departures I want to acknowledge, a few highlights of programs recently, but I did want to spend a little time also just teeing up a conversation about next year for the council. So first on staffing, I want to welcome 2 new fellows. So SGC, once again, has an executive fellow, Sarah Samden, which we're very excited about. And then for the first time, the California Council on Science and Technology has made their science fellows available to the executive branch. And we have been lucky enough to have one of 5 who are in the executive branch, Christina Echeverria, who's going to be working with our climate change research program, and I think working in a very collaborative way with a lot of us here on hopefully assessment and resilience activities. So that is exciting. I am very sad that we have 2 big departures coming up, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank both Julia Nagel from our TCC team and then Ulysses Arzola, who keeps the wheels on the bus. He is going to be moving on to join the city of Sacramento. And so really big holes to fill, but I just wanted to publicly thank them for all the work that they have done. And so with that, we are doing some hiring. We are in the process of hiring for 2 positions in our Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program. We are also starting up, as I think we noted, we got approval in the budget to just hire 3 staff to implement the Health and All Policies program with state-funded positions at SGC. So this will really be building out that work. And so we just posted for 3 positions to build out that program with really a focus on how we implement Health and All Policies as a practice at SGC, focusing on healthy and equitable communities and land use. And then finally, we will be hiring for Julia's position. And then just today, after I made these slides, we posted also to hire for Ulysses' position. So we are busy onboarding new folks. We'll have some new staff, hopefully by our February meeting that we'll be bringing on board.
Are those on the SGC website? They're posted?
You can reach them through our announcements on our website, and then they're all also posted on the Cal Careers website, and we're happy to share that link to anyone who, if they have trouble finding them, just to let us know.
And if folks will take the time to put that out to their networks, we're trying really to broaden our searches, all of our searches across OPR and SGC as widely as possible with as many networks as possible. So please take a moment to do that. That would be really appreciated.
Yes, we have, as part of our Racial Equity Action Plan, have really been working hard to, one of the places we've really focused is on our hiring process and both anonymizing and going through a much more rigorous process to evaluate candidates, but also to really tap into a lot of different avenues. And we've actually seen tremendous success. We're getting a lot of interest from different organizations, we've found some wonderful people through this process. So we're very excited about that. So next, I just wanted to let folks know, we may not, I think we might have talked about this, but SGC does submit an annual report to the legislature each year. We completed one that actually needed a few more updates, and so we have recently finalized those updates. It is now available on our website that has been submitted to the legislature. We've been doing a few initial briefings just to get folks more familiar with SGC and specifically with some of our programs, but we'll also be using this really as an outreach tool as needed. There is a nice short executive summary that does bring together a lot of the work that we do. And so that is available on our website if folks are looking for it. And then we're already thinking about how to get ready for doing it again next year and really telling more stories about the work that SGC does. I also wanted to talk about an event we had in November. On November 5th, the Climate Change Research Program. Can't really see that picture, but that's a lot of people, 200 plus people in a room working together to talk about meaningful engagement in research, and not just a bunch of plenaries and PowerPoints, but really it was actually much more of an interactive workshop setting. People had assigned seats so that we were mixing up the research community, local government, community-based organizations, and others to really dig into what does it look like and how do folks work with scientists, how do scientists work with communities, what have been successes, what have been challenges. And so that was a really successful event. We're very excited. A lot of partners and a lot of help from our agency, member agencies and others to put that together. So thank you to everyone who worked on that, especially our research team, and then also everyone who attended and participated. I think an excellent sign that most of those tables were still full at the end of the day, so that was great. We also announced a collaboration through that event with the Thriving Earth Exchange, which is an initiative of the American Geophysical Union. American Geophysical Union is the world's largest scientific organization, if folks don't follow that. And what the Thriving Earth Exchange is a really cool model where they have developed matching scientists with communities to address very specific needs that are community generated. They have a very interesting model, which actually informed a lot of what we did during this day. We've partnered with folks from the Thriving Earth Exchange on a number of events over the last few years, and are excited in this collaboration. What we're going to be doing is identifying and helping focus on communities in California and matching them with scientists to address specific issues, and we will be focusing especially on under-resourced communities in line with SGC's goals. A lot more to come on that as we work out the details, and would love to talk with anyone about that partnership because we're very excited about it, and I think it's a really interesting model that really is an evolution in a different way of our technical assistance program, bringing scientific expertise and scientists who are committed to really engaging with communities to do that work. Yes?
So just one idea on that, I really love this program, would be to think about the recipients of TCC grants and their respective sister cities. So they all have sister city networks, and thinking about like how to tie that, so they're learning about TCC and then their sister cities, and like to the extent that there was overlap between that universe and the people that were in your research symposium, and then how you connect those universities together with the universities in those sister cities. So I love this program. Anything I can do to support it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we're very excited about it as well. And I do think there's a lot of opportunity with our grantees, and then, but using that as a starting point to reach out to more communities. Okay, the next quick update I wanted to provide was on the racial equity work broadly. So not our specific work at SGC, but the statewide initiative, which up to this point has been the Capital Cohort. When the Capital Cohort started, that was a pilot to see what kind of interest there would be in doing racial equity work. And it turned out a lot, and it's been a tremendous success. And so now we're really evolving this work into away from a pilot, and it's now the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity, or CORE. And so CORE is a community of California state government teams that are all going to be working together to advance racial equity. We're going to continue to do this work in partnership with the Public Health Institute, which has been our non-governmental partner on the health and all policies work. And now that we've had a number of departments and agencies going through this work, we are going to be structuring CORE in two tracks. One is going to be the learning cohort year, And that will be the departments that are looking to develop a racial equity action plan featuring the work that we've done with Race Forward through the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, or GARE, which you've heard us talk quite a bit about, that really has training modules and a curriculum that is designed to support state governments and state departments and agencies. And then we'll also be running an advanced implementation cohort, and that is for the agencies and departments that have developed racial equity action plans to really look at how to implement and grow that work and learn from one another. So very excited about that. There's actually going to be an executive information session tomorrow, or sorry, not tomorrow, getting ahead of myself, Thursday, the 19th, in the Governor's Council room. And so anyone who, I know a number of agencies up on the dais and others who have not yet been able to participate are very welcome to come. Dwayne Marsh, who has really led a lot of this work, and the co-director of GARE will be there. We did this event also last year, earlier, it was really earlier in 2019. It was wonderful, really great to hear him speak about it. We currently have 21 state entities signed up to participate in this, but if folks are not and are still interested or interested to know if your agency has, please let us know. Also, we mentioned before the partnership we have with Institute for Local Government, which is an element of our technical assistance program, and we did a formal announcement of the Boost initiative, which is working with 10 cities and 2 regions to do much more in-depth sort of place-based technical assistance. So working not just with a single program, but really working with communities to address specific needs. I just wanted to provide this list of those cities and regions. I won't read them out, but to get a sense, a really nice mix of communities, regions, et cetera, to pilot this work. And then we are also continuing a number of other technical assistance partnerships, including extending the work with the Department of Food and Agriculture to have the specialists all around the state to support farmers, and continuing with a number of other partnerships to advance that technical assistance work, both in our programs and others. And I do want to sort of foreshadow in the presentation with the Sustainable Ag Lands Conservation Program, a real demonstrated success of that technical assistance, which we focus on the planning grant portion of that program, and we saw a tremendous increase in the interest and success of that program. And then, so finally, I just wanted to say we do have 3 open solicitations right now. We're going to have a very busy February with receiving applications to the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, closing February 11th with just over $500 million. $60 million about for TCC, due at the end of February, and then just under $5 million for the research program, due February 12th. So we are looking to be running those programs, evaluating all of those applications over the spring, and bringing award recommendations back to the council. So right now, really busy doing a lot of workshops, outreach, technical assistance with applicants, but that is all running very smoothly. So that's really it on our sort of program updates. And then I just want to take a couple of minutes to tee up a little bit of what I'm hoping we can dedicate more time to in February, which is really looking ahead to 2020 and what the goals of doing that would be, and then sort of some ideas on approaches, but then also provide an opportunity for seeding of thoughts if folks have any. And so one, I think just having wrapped up the first year with a lot of new council members coming on board, with the Newsom administration really establishing its priorities and goals, and I think the continued success of SGC's programs, really want to look ahead to 2020 and think about how we start translating and transferring our model, our collaborative model and approach to strategic opportunities and policy and program opportunities that are emerging around a number of different issues. And then how to leverage and utilize SGC as a collaborative platform to advance that work. So really thinking about specifically around climate change, but also with an equity lens to that work. And then how we're really engaging our key staff, so from our member agencies and our other partners, to really advance a collaborative policy agenda for the council. So those are some goals that I have starting to flesh out for 2020. And then I just, I think as we're looking ahead, a couple of things we're thinking about is just internally is using January to really engage our key staff and other partners to tee up a more substantive discussion on this for our February meeting. Revisiting the funding analysis that we got started earlier this year, and where we got on that, looking at Fresno and the Tahoe Basin, is we've been able to pull together 3 funding sources, really looking at the Resources Agency bond data, competitive grant data from CalSTA through SB1, and then we have the California climate investment data. And I think what that has revealed to us is the challenge to try to marry all of these data sources together to say something cohesive about a place. I don't think with that, we also don't have a sense of how complete a picture is that right now. How do we marry point investment data with more broad regional investment data with corridor investment data? So just mapping the geometries of the data alongside just the trying to map the various fields across that. So that is something sort of recommitting to seeing where we can get that, and then also trying to get a sense with those data sources that are the ones that are most easily accessible to us, how complete a picture are we getting at this point? And so really then with that, wanting to focus our February meeting on trying to coalesce around a strategic vision and direction for the council for 2020 and beyond if we would like, but starting, I think this really, just as an observer and now as a leader of SGC for a while and then a longtime observer of SGC, I do think this represents a shift in how the council has been doing its work. And so I want us to really think about how we most strategically leverage and use the council to advance a more collaborative policy agenda. And with that, I will finish up and then I will take any comments and questions, because I actually think today's meeting has a number of topics that touch on exactly the kinds of things we can be thinking about. We're going to start with the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program. And as we know, this program is designed to connect our agricultural land protection and conservation with our infill and development goals, and really take a sustainability lens to doing that work. And so this will be the first time that as a program, we're oversubscribed, and then we've also been looking at easements with a much more critical eye, and the applications of, are they truly meeting the intention of the program? And I think, and are they meeting the risk factors that we have laid out? And I think starting to see that we can be much more strategic in how we're applying that lens. And so Virginia will talk through the recommendations we're making, but that's very much the eye to which we were looking at that this year, is how are we taking this conservation money that is unique, that is tied to our AHSC, it comes from our AHSC statute, it is tied to that integrated approach, and really leveraging it to achieve the vision of that program. And so, like I said, Virginia will talk more about that, but I think that there is a real opportunity for us to think about that also as we move forward into future rounds. We're also going to get an update on the high-speed rail project from the director, Brian Kelly, and their director of planning, Meg Cederoth, and I think that's a really wonderful opportunity to see how a transformative infrastructure investment that has a tremendous number of planning needs and other infrastructure investment needs around it, what is the role we can play in thinking about that and being a way, leveraging our investments. Our TCC investment in Fresno is tied to that to the high-speed rail station, or located right near it. And so really thinking about how those work together. And then finally, we're going to talk about Egon Terplin from SGC is going to talk about the Regions Rise Together initiative, which has been a partnership of OPR and GoBiz, and really thinking about how we're linking economic development and sustainability, and thinking about the connectivity of our region, of our state, and why lifting all regions of our state, I think really applying that equity lens at a macro level is so important. And so I think these 3 topics hopefully will seed a little bit of ideas for ways that we as a council can be plugging in and being more, and strategically engaging in initiatives. And these are just some examples, but I think together actually do provide an interesting opportunity to look at the kind of work that we can be doing that really cuts across a number of different agencies, departments, and topics. That is all I have. I'm happy to take questions, ideas, or just turn it over to Virginia.
I had a very quick question, really, because it's kind of our go-to item that we started when we started at the beginning of this year, which is kind of builds on the earlier discussion of Virus Green, which is looking at cumulative impacts. We're trying to kind of understand the cumulative benefits of state funding, as you were describing in Fresno and the Tahoe Basin. And I guess I had two questions. One, as we work with finance, and as finance kind of is starting to gain the benefits of Fiscal, which hopefully, you know, at a very granular level tells us what we're spending money
I think
on.
you're the first person to ever say benefit and fiscal in the same sentence.
Well, I'm hoping. This is aspirational. The aspirational goal would be that would allow us to better code and understand what we're doing across all the agencies on this podium for a specific geography. And to the extent it doesn't, and to Kate and other people's points, there's obviously a negative burden of inputting all this data. We should make sure that it does allow us to do what we want. So I'd be willing to convene us with Department of Finance just to explain what we're trying to do with a lens to how they could help use Fiscal to get us better geographic data on what community benefits are from cumulative state funding.
Great, and I think another, there is an initiative happening also through the state library where they are developing a grants portal for the state. And I actually right now can't remember the bill number that is in response to, but we've also started some early conversations with them as well, because I think it may provide an opportunity to not just look at the funding opportunities, but then also to do some follow through. But thank you, that would be great.
Just two quick suggestions, if you don't mind toggling back one or two slides to what the staff is going to be kind of considering in January. And that is utilizing this collaborative platform. So I've said before, I think that SGC has developed into a really effective, integrated sort of best practice grant maker on climate. And I think we should continue that. And I think that is sort of well established. This sort of collection of agencies together on a bi-monthly basis is unique. So I think we should utilize it to tackle some issues that are not tackled by any of our agencies alone. So two that I just recommend for consideration. One is just this ongoing problem we have with vehicle miles traveled in California. While we have made progress on technology and energy, et cetera, we are going to be stymied meeting our emission reduction goals if vehicle miles traveled continues to actually increase on a per person basis. So I think this could be a really interesting forum for that. The other is climate resilience. We obviously recognize we each do climate resilience in our agencies, but there's a critical connection we have across our agencies, whether it's public health or agriculture or natural resources, et cetera, transportation. So I just think this could be an interesting public forum where we put some staff firepower on this and then have discussions and resulting in a more cohesive strategy on resilience for the state.
Yeah, I would second both of those ideas. And also just say that I think it's exciting to think about strategic planning for SGC. One of the things about this governor, and I think this administration, is the approach to climate change is very integrated. It's very much about sort of how is climate reflected across every agency. It's not over here in sort of a bucket. It's not just over there with these two down here on resources at Cali PA. It's really across the board. You know, looking at the things you brought up, ag land conservation, what happens when an acre of land is converted? It's a huge emissions. It's 50 to 70 times the emissions if you convert it to urban land. There's a VMT implication to that. There's a carbon removal implication to that. There's a wildfire implication to that. All those things are interrelated, and this administration is very much about the fact that they're interrelated. So, I can't tell you the number of conversations I've been in the last 6 months where people will be talking about how do we approach some issue, and we'll say, well, where is it that we can get all those agencies together to be talking about this in a strategic way? And it's sort of, this is the answer to that question in all cases. So So I think it's really important to have the strategic discussion because there will be so many opportunities coming the way of the council, and having a sense of what we think the highest best use is, and what we think we should be doing, what we think others should be doing, what the implications are across the board for the council, I think is incredibly important. So thank you for teeing that up. And I guess February, we're going to be starting to talk about that in more detail. So that will be great. I am looking forward to it. Go ahead, Mike.
I always feel like it's my job to represent local government. So I want to make sure as
The
we're
people
going across, we're
must
also going up and down, right? So also at the county level and the city level, I want to make sure we're integrating horizontally as well as vertically. And just kudos and really appreciate everything you've done this whole year, you and your staff, and you pointed out your staff changeover, which makes it difficult. And this whole board, and for the majority of this board, has changed over, which makes it difficult, but you've just done a fantastic job. I had an opportunity to attend the symposium, and just, again, kudos for a job very, very well done there, and had the opportunity to work with the ILG and yourself with the Boost program, and again, kudos. So just very, very, as always,
Thanks.
you didn't pay me to say this stuff, but very, very impressed, and you continue to do an outstanding job, and kudos to your staff for a great year. Thanks.
Hear, hear. Thank you. To the SGC staff, a round of applause. Thank you. Make our jobs a lot easier. And thanks for that. It's a great reminder, because that's the other thing about SGC, is that the work actually happens at the local level. Even though we talk about it up here, it's actually happening at the local level. And so we're feeding that back up. And that's a unique opportunity as well. So thank you for bringing that up. Any other comments, questions on the executive director's report? All right, we're going to move to a major item of the agenda. I have many, many cards on this, but first, I'm assuming, yes, there is a presentation from Virginia. So on the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation Program Awards, Virginia.
Great, thank you for having me. Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and members of the council. My name is Virginia Jameson. I'm a Climate and Conservation Program Manager at the Department of Conservation, which administers the Salk program on behalf of SGC. So I'm here today to report to you on staff's recommendations for program awards. So today my presentation will consist of a brief overview of the program background and goals, the staff recommendation, a description of the application review process, the recommended projects themselves, and next steps. So first I'll start with the overview. The principal goal of the Salk program is to keep farmland in agriculture and to further the purposes of AB 32 by supporting infill development and by avoiding increases in the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the conversion of California's agricultural land to development. Salk is a component of the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program. In addition to supporting efforts to encourage infill, the guidelines prioritize projects that protect lands at most risk of conversion to residential and urban development, promote agricultural sustainability, support land use planning processes consistent with the goals of AHSC, and provide multiple co-benefits. We have two eligible project types available under Salk. The first is agricultural conservation easement grants, which are grants that protect agricultural lands through the acquisition of voluntary agricultural conservation easements. They're permanent. The second type are planning grants, and these are for local governments to develop and implement plans for the protection of agricultural lands at risk from conversion to other uses. There are many co-benefits also associated with the program. These include ensuring that there's land for the production of food, that there's a buffer between communities and fire-prone areas, that we protect aquifer recharge areas, as well as keeping land available for habitat and open space. So over the past 5 years, the Salk program has entered into grant agreements for the protection of approximately 92,000 acres. That includes both farm and ranch land, as well as for 8 planning grants. This round of the program, currently the program operates on a yearly cycle, and this was the 5th round. We received 43 pre-proposals, 40 for easements and 3 for planning. And then ultimately, on the September 13th due date, we received 38 full easement applications and 6 full planning grant applications, which we're really excited about, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. We are recommending funding for 31 easement projects. Of the full applications received, there were 7 that were not recommending for funding. 1 project did not meet program eligibility criteria. 2 did not meet readiness criteria, and 4 did not meet the program goal of supporting infill development. The recommended action before you today is to approve staff recommendation to award $56,896,857 in fiscal year 18-19 greenhouse gas reduction funds to support the acquisition of 31 agricultural conservation easements and 6 planning grants through round 5 of the Sustainable Ag Lands Conservation Program. That award consists of 6 planning grants totaling $1.4 million and 31 easement program projects totaling $55.4 million. So I'd like to give you an overview of the process that staff used to review applications, and I'm going to start with the planning grants. I mentioned the pre-proposal option. That is an option for planning grants. It's not required. We received 3 of those, which we were happy to provide feedback on. And then when we got the final applications, that consisted of an eligibility check, confirmation that the project is consistent with Salk and SGC goals, and confirmation that each project supports the implementation of a sustainable community strategy or similar plan, which is required by the guidelines. Applicants could receive up to 80 points for selection criteria, and that included the applicant's description of project need, co-benefits associated with the proposed project, evidence of collaboration amongst stakeholders, integration with other planning processes, organizational capacity, and whether the project was eligible for priority population status. All of the projects scored within the 50 to 70% range, or 70-point range. So for the review process for the conservation easement grants, in this case, a pre-proposal is required. Staff performed an initial assessment of the project and provided feedback to the applicant. The final applications, which were due September 13th, were reviewed for eligibility and readiness, and then scored based on a variety of factors that reflect the specific goals of the program, which includes the threat of conversion, and others that take into consideration any environmental, economic, and other co-benefits, as well as an estimate of the greenhouse gas emissions that will be avoided if the project is completed. Staff also conducted preliminary title reviews, checked public databases for any hazardous conditions or environmental issues known on the property, and conducted site visits at each property. Each applicant had to identify a specific risk factor for conversion known as a risk option, which also serves to categorize the type of development that is likely to be avoided because of the project. That development category is then used to estimate the emissions from vehicle miles traveled, heating energy usage, and off-gassing from soil disturbance that is avoided by the project using a quantification methodology that's developed by the Air Resources Board. Once we had the projects evaluated and scored, then we presented them to SGC key staff for deliberation and recommendations. And the result is the proposed awards that you have before you today. So I'll start with the proposed planning grant awards. HSC's Enabling Statute, Public Resources Code 75212, authorizes planning grants to support the implementation of a sustainable community strategy, or if an SCS isn't required locally, and a similar plan that supports greenhouse gas reduction efforts and that promotes infill and compact development. Eligible applicants for this part of the program are cities, counties, LAFCOs, and special districts. The Round 5 guidelines allowed applicants to propose projects that establish goals, policies, and objectives that support the long-term viability and protection of agricultural land, identify priority land for conservation, and to designate a set of implementation measures to achieve those objectives. Receiving 6 applications this year was a big coup for us. Unfortunately, the planning grant portion of the program had been underutilized in recent years, Last year in the fourth round of the program, we didn't receive any applications, which was very disappointing. And because planning is fundamental to the continued viability of farmland in our state, and because the state will never be able to afford to buy enough easements on all its best farmland, this year SGC and DOC doubled down on our efforts to increase participation. SGC dedicated $200,000 to a technical assistance contract, and that was awarded to an entity called Cultivate LLC. Cultivate and DOC hosted a series of workshops in the Central Valley and Southern California in order to spread information about the program. And then Cultivate selected 3 local jurisdictions, including the County of San Diego, the LAFCO of Inland Empire and San Bernardino, and Ventura County. Also COO, because these are our first sets of interested parties from the Southern California area. So if all goes according to the plan, those 3 entities will work with Cultivate to prepare applications for the 6th round of the program in 2020. And SGC has also decided to continue on with the technical assistance funding for another year, which should help us gain momentum in our planning grant portion of our program. So fortuitously, this outreach effort also bore more immediate results. We received applications from 6 local government entities who did not require any technical assistance for this round, and staff's recommendation is to award funding for all 6. So before you are the planning projects for which we received applications. I won't go into great detail in each one, but each meets the statutory requirements and guidelines objectives, and staff were impressed with the level of thoughtfulness and creativity that went into each of the proposals. The Salk planning grants are actually very flexible about what applicants can apply for, as long as they're meeting local needs and then some of the aforementioned requirements of the program. But these proposals on a whole seek to address the Salk goals of encouraging infill development, protecting farmland, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and they also address local goals. So for example, the creation of an American viticultural area in Yucaipa, the protection of farmlands in the face of SGMA implementation in Madera, and the implementation of recommendations from past Salk-funded strategies in Mendocino. And as I mentioned, the total funds requested for this portion of the program are $1,404,239. So next I would like to tell you about staff's recommendations for agricultural conservation easement grants. Of the 38 applications received, as I mentioned, 31 are recommended for funding. This amount totals $55,896,857. They are located in about 19 counties, as far north as Plumas County and as far south as Santa Barbara County. And this suite of projects would protect a total of 20,864 acres of farm and ranch land and would avoid about 4.5 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. We won't have time to look at every single one today, but I wanted to highlight for you a few that staff were particularly impressed with. So this project in front of you is, the applicant is the City of San Luis Obispo. The property consists of a 1,000-acre ranch located along the northern border of the City of San Luis Obispo, Sphere of Influence, and Highway 101. The ranch supports a cow-calf beef operation and is comprised of grassland, chaparral, oak woodland, and riparian corridors. The property is in close proximity to other protected land and within 5 miles of the Los Padres National Forest. So the project would help maintain significant habitat, a wildlife corridor, and has the added benefit that the surrounding lands act as a potential wildfire buffer between the city and the forest. The second project I'd like to highlight is we've actually included in your packet today a November 27th New York Times article about the owner of the property. This is the Agricultural Land-Based Training Association's property. They use the site to train aspiring farmers, and then they also rent them plots at below market rates until they get on their feet with their businesses. This property consists of 112 acres, 110 of which are prime irrigated farmland. It's an organic farm. It's 2 miles northwest of Chular, also south of Salinas. And at that location, Alba teaches skills like business management, marketing, and that's in addition to all the mechanics of farming. So you can see kind of on this map that the property is located near other Salk protected and California Farmland Conservancy Program protected properties. And there's a couple more that fall off the bottom of the map. And if you could see them, you'd see that they form a green belt nearly all the way across the Salinas Valley. Okay, so the last one I will talk about today is a property that, if awarded, would extinguish 1,215 low-density development rights and add to a continuous corridor of protected land to the north. And then also the project to the lower right is around 3 Salk project, and that one will be closing very soon. This project would protect 3,155 acres of rangeland west of Copperopolis, and the property is used for grazing. It's a little bit hard to see here on this map, but the property is also adjacent to a low-density rural residential development to the east, and then I mentioned those protected lands to the northwest. So before we get back to the recommendation, I just wanted to give us some updates on the next steps. Staff has been working really hard to prepare a draft of our round 6 guidelines for public comment, and it's our hope that we will have those posted by this Friday, actually the 20th. And some of the changes we've been considering are increased tribal engagement, a look at entity eligibility, as well as continuing to refine the program's risk options. So once that draft is up and folks have had a chance to see them, I apologize that it's over Christmas. We will hold public workshops mid-January. We haven't quite nailed down those dates yet, so stay tuned, but we will be announcing them on both SGC and DOC's websites. And then in February, we're going to bring a final draft to you. So with that, I will return to our recommended action, which is to approve the staff recommendation to award $56,896 and $857 in fiscal year 18-19 funds to support 31 agricultural easements and 6 planning grants through round 5 of the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program.
Thank you. It was a great comprehensive presentation, and just noting that Amanda Hansen has replaced Wade Crowfoot for resources. Hi, Amanda. We have a lot of comments on this item, including just for folks on the dais, you have a letter printed out from North Coast Regional Land Trust, which is on this item that you should look at. And then I have 21 comments on this item, so we are going to limit comments. I can't actually change the seconds here on my thing. I can only change the minutes, but so I'm going to 2 minutes per, but I'm really going to be strict about it because that will take a while to do. So anyone who goes under that will be rewarded with love. I know, exactly. So we're going to do public comments, and then we'll have an opportunity for folks on the dais to comment and ask questions, and then we will have a vote. So I'm going to start in order that they were given to Sandra. So to start with Leslie Chan.
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and council members. My name is Leslie Chan. I'm the Deputy Director for the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County, and just wanted to take a brief second to thank you all for your focus on agricultural conservation easements as a significant tool in achieving the state's climate resilience and greenhouse gas emission goals. We're really excited that this is our first application to this funding program, and there's a lot of opportunity in Santa Barbara County for using conservation easements on agricultural properties to help with these goals. And the property that we've submitted for is 1,000 acres. Not only does it have productive grazing land, it's also a lot of great habitat in that area. So just wanted to say thanks again for the partnership. We really look forward to future opportunities to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I forgot to set your timer, but you stayed under anyway. So look at that.
Good start.
Very good start. All right. I have several people coming from a Solano County perspective. I'm going to start with Tracy Ellison.
Chair Gordon and Council, thank you for allowing us to step to the mic and say thank you for all of your hard work and effort supporting the Salk program. What an exciting day for all of us to learn what Round 5 is going to produce in regards to the state's program and strategies for climate change. Through the guidelines and the communications with the Department of Conservation, many land trusts are working hard to bring beneficial projects that meet both your guidelines and the needs of our landowners. This round, Solano Land Trust collaborated with 3 local landowners in Solano County. These projects are productive, irrigated, family-owned farms. These landowner growers are wonderful stewards of the land. We have, with active production, farm practices supporting healthy soil and water conservation, and always the future of agriculture in their minds as they grow their crops, raise their families, and work in Solano County. These landowners have gone one step further and made the choice to protect their land into the future. As a person working in the land conservation community, I find that the stability in the funding and the availability of this program so that we can continue to go out and speak with landowners over a longer period of time. We build these partnerships, they aren't actions that take place overnight. And the stability in the fact that we have funding available really supports the job that I do. It supports the work that you're asking us to do, and it really brings landowners to the table. So we appreciate always your hard work, and thank you again.
Thank you so much. And I neglected, I'm sorry to say that we also have another replacement. Yana Olson Morgan has replaced Secretary Galley on the dais as well. So sorry, Yana, I didn't see you. Oh, and EPA is now, EPA is just gone.
Not taking volunteers.
They're just, I think he's coming back, yeah. Our next speaker is Russ Lester. I'd like to also ask the next couple speakers to just come up so that we start a little line here. So Ken Schroeder and Christy Jameson are the 2 after Russ. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm a co-owner of Dixon Ridge Farms, a vertically integrated organic walnut operation in Winters, Solano County. I grew up in the Santa Clara Valley, which we first came here in 1860s and started farming in the 1880s in the Santa Clara Valley in what was called the Valley of Heart's Delight. And so I grew up during a period of time where that was being developed into what it is today. And I'll say that kind of sarcastically a little bit as far as agriculture is concerned, and didn't want that to happen to other land. So that when we started farming up here, one of my goals was to actually do conservation easements on our land eventually. I actually have been involved with the Solano Land Trust for over 30 years, American Farmland Trust for like 40 years, YOLO Land Trust for 25, 30 years. So it's been in my blood to conserve. We are one of the few entities that could say that we're greenhouse gas negative and carbon negative due to our renewable energy projects that we do. And so this will just help us go further down that road. And so we appreciate the opportunity to fulfill a lifetime dream, really, for me. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and for everything you've done for the state and your county. Ken.
Yeah, I'm Ken Schroeder, a Dixon area farmer, 5th generation, and I kind of laughed when Tracy said it doesn't happen overnight. I believe it was probably 10 years ago when we first talked to Solano Land Trust, and it takes a while, but we're fortunate to be part of this program, and want to thank all the agencies involved, especially Solano Land Trust. They've been wonderful to work with. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Oh, these are all such great comments. So Christy Jameson, and then she's going to be followed, just so we know, by Charlotte Mitchell and Catherine. It's either Leiden or Lydon or something else.
Leiden.
Leiden, perfect. Christy, go ahead.
So my name is Christy Jamison, and I'm with Feather River Land Trust, which was that little blip all the way up there in Plymouth County on your map. We are definitely a source water for the State Water Project, and this ranch has a beautiful Wolf Creek running through it that goes into the North Fork of the Feather River and helps 22 million people get drinking water. So I wanted to thank you for this opportunity and say how great the DOC staff is that we get to work with. We are on the eve of closing our first round 3 Salk easement. It takes a long time to do these projects. This ranch is 600 acres that is sandwiched between 2 severely disadvantaged communities, has housing within 800 feet of its borders, but is a beautiful cattle grazing operation with native mountain meadows and forest lands. And it is the longest continuous undeveloped edge in Indian Valley. So we are very excited to be able to preserve it. The goals of the funding are to pursue organic certification for this ranch, which will be the first of its kind in this area, and to restore some of the beautiful historic structures. This has been continuously operated as a cattle operation for over 100 years and has a great old barn that needs some help, and the owner is going to put some of the easement money into that, which is great, and also to develop a forest management plan. The forested part of the property has not been logged or thinned for quite a while, so he's got some great goals for the funding, and I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for the testimony. Lauren Sanchez replacing Jared Blumenfeld for Cali, PA. Cali, PA is back in the house. Charlotte Mitchell, hi.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Council. Charlotte Mitchell, California Farmland Trust, and I too share my gratitude for funding some of these conservation easements and the landowners that we're working with, which you'll hear from some of them in addition to this afternoon. But what an exciting time where we can work in protecting the natural working landscape, while achieving climate change and those goals, but also protecting a nearly $50 billion agricultural industry that supports California's economy and producing not only food that's here grown locally and consumed locally, but throughout the globe. So thank you from that aspect.
Thank you. Well said. We have Catherine. Was it Leiden or Lydden?
Ledan.
Ledan.
Yeah, different than anybody
Okay.
ever thinks,
She's
huh?
going to be followed by Jeannie Merrill and Mike Wright.
So first, I just want to say I'm incredibly grateful to be in front of the Strategic Growth Council again this year. I have, been engaged and a student of the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation Program since its inception. And I'm sorry that Councilmember Fisher is not here because we've had some excellent dialogues over the years. So today I'm here representing the Marin Agricultural Land Trust, and we have a project that you're considering for consideration. It's a 300-acre cattle ranch right near the border of Petaluma, and if you're familiar with West Sonoma, you know it's an area where the land is parcelized. This particular ranch is right next to McAvoy Ranch, if you've ever been there. So it's a gorgeous piece of property. It not only seals off that edge in Petaluma, but it has incredible watershed and habitat resources as well. And the thing that I like about the project the most is I believe that it's the first Salk project that is the location of a novel. And so the property has some writing cabins, and Michael Adagi, who wrote The English Patient, spends 2 months of the year there writing. And his book, Divisadero, is set on the ranch. So that's my another benefit of agricultural conservation. So in the very little time I have left, I just want to say that I have been involved in this program for a long time, and I think one of the remarkable things about it is the incredible diversity of projects that have been funded, everything from the intensely farmed urban edge land in Salinas Valley that grows our nation's fruits and vegetables to these huge tracts of rangeland that sequester carbon and protect our watersheds. And all of this work is being done at a time when we're increasingly realizing the importance of regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture to protecting the health of our climate. So thank you very much, and I will I'll see you next year.
Thank you. And that book is on my audiobook queue, so now I'm going to move it up.
All right, I can recommend it.
Thank you, Jeannie.
My name's Jeannie Merrill. I'm with the California Climate and Agriculture Network. We're a coalition of sustainable and organic agriculture organizations. We like this time of year because we get to come before you and say thanks for some great work. The Salk program is the country's only program that focuses on farmland conservation as a climate change strategy. And I think it's really paying off in significant ways in a number of communities, as we've seen today with all of the speakers about their projects. I wanted to say just a few words about the planning grants, because this has been a long road to hoe, and we were so glad to see the changes made to the planning grants to make them relevant again to local government, because as Virginia said, we simply won't have enough money as a state to protect all the land that we need to be resilient to climate change. So we need also to make those changes at the local government level to incorporate farmland conservation as part of our planning efforts. And seeing the technical assistance funds to reach out to local government to make the case for these planning grants really paid off significantly, especially in the Central Valley. So just want to encourage, glad to hear that those funds will continue for next year, but I hope it's not just next year. I hope that we can have a longer term investment in technical assistance so that we can reach local governments. One of the things that we've been doing in partnership with others is looking at an assessment of Salk and HSC to understand how those two programs are both supporting infill and farmland conservation. And we keep hearing in the interviews that we're doing that planning grants make all the difference. And through AB 101 and other efforts, there's going to be a significant infusion of planning grant dollars out there, and we hope that those dollars also consider the farmland conservation piece of this, because we know we need that urban infill affordable housing, but we also need that farmland conservation piece, and we're going to get there through planning. Thanks.
Thank you. Real quick, Jeannie, when are you expecting that assessment of HSC and Salk to be done?
First quarter of next year.
Great, thank you. We're looking forward to seeing that. Okay, I have Mike Wright next, followed by Lauren Miller and Markley Bavinger, I think it says.
Thank you. I'm Mike Wright. One of the projects that's up for conservation easement belongs to my mother and myself, about 1,700 acres in Madera County. I would like to thank you first for considering the program and tell you just a little bit about it. My family has a long history of ranching and land stewardship, starting with my great-grandfather. My grandfather, who ranched on this property prior to my father and myself, was a driving force with the state legislature in getting the approval for control burning and for grazing improvement, and along with fire protection. He also participated in many rangeland management programs on the ranch. My father, while ranching most of his life, also worked with the University of California on an experimental station. He too worked with rangeland improvement and agronomy experiments on the ranch, and more specifically with water development projects on the subject property. My goal to preserve and improve the quality of this property so that future generations can appreciate it and it will remain in agricultural use into the future. The property itself has some unique features, including diversity of trees in one portion and over a mile of the Fresno River through another portion. With a conservation easement, the scenic quality of the Oakhurst Valley will be maintained, along with providing a fire buffer. It will also help to maintain the water quality downstream on the Fresno River. An easement will allow this property to be a viable, sustainable pasture land throughout the future. There are also many historical features on this property, including old homesteads and Indian encampment sites. These will all be protected into perpetuity through this easement. My mother, who could not be here today, and myself would like to thank you for your consideration in the funding of this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I know, I want to apply to all of these guys. Lauren Miller.
Good afternoon, Council, and I want to thank Mike first, who is my partnering landowner. Without our landowners, that's where we start.
And like Solano was saying, having this continuous funding really helps to build relationships and ready projects, of course, along with the advice from your staff. But I wanted to, considering the Wright Ranch for funding today would bring our total suite of Salk funding to Sierra Foothill Conservancy to over 12,000 acres in Madera, Mariposa, Fresno, and Eastern Merced counties. So we're really excited about that. And I also want to say thank you for supporting our county partners, our local county government partners, some of which are here today. We worked with Madera County and with Mariposa County in helping them get their planning grants off the ground and shaping them so that they work for the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation Program and also for conservation easements and the conservation community in general. And we look forward to the program continuing to be robust.
Thank you so much. All right. Markley, is that right?
Markley Bavinger with the Trust for Public Land. And I've been busily crossing off my extra paragraphs to keep keeping limits. So in case I crossed it off somehow, I want to start by thanking everyone. Really wonderful. And also, in particular, the DOC staff. It's just been an incredible pleasure to work with them. So thorough and diligent and responsive. Really impressive work. So the Trust for Public Land, which is the organization I'm with, works all over the state and the nation. And I just wanted to share that in the Trust for Public Land's view, the Salk program is one of the most innovative and important strategies in California. The funding to incentivize private landowners to keep their property in agriculture is really a critical tool. It helps us realize a vision for California that protects our precious soils and natural resources, our landscapes and economies, and keeps them climate resilient, and supports healthy communities, reduces commutes, encourages public transit, and so much more. As the most productive agricultural state in the nation, we really have to work hard to protect our farmlands that are being lost at 50,000 acres a year on average over the last 30 years. And while $56 million sounds like a lot, we really believe that it's just the beginning of our work together. And speaking personally as a professional with decades of experience in this space, conservation easements are really one of the only tools that work. When you have private lands and private motivations and economies, you need to have funds to incentivize people to make this step and protect their lands in perpetuity. This is definitely a local story, to your point, and that Lasogga Land and Cattle is owned by a man, Al Lasogga, who has been working in the community, the Yuba County community, for many years to kind of pop-a-mole down all of the attempts to really convert that landscape to something other than agricultural lands. There's been new towns proposed, there's been sprawling subdivision proposed, and it's been the people of Yuba County going to the ballot box that has stopped this to date. But without, a permanent restriction like a conservation easement will result in, it's likely that that landscape will be converted, and in Yuba County, the agricultural landscape is the economic backbone. So we really need to all work together, and in fact, this story is one about a lot of organizations, a lot of funders coming together. About $15 million. Oh, that's it? Wow. Have gone in, and it's going to be great.
Thank you. I actually gave you a few extra seconds there, but I really appreciate it. Thank you. I know 2 minutes goes really fast. I have next, I'm going to not even try with some of these last names because of everyone's handwriting. Steve from Mariposa County, and then I have Bob Hill after that, and then I have Dan from San Benito after that.
Good afternoon and season's greetings from Mariposa. We're here to express our appreciation, and both myself, Steve Ingfer from Mariposa County Planning Department, and also Jessica's here in the audience, and one of our partners here from Sierra Foothills Conservancy. So we're very happy in light of your message about keeping it short. I'm going to keep it short. Thanks for the opportunity. This is really important for Mariposa. We're a right to agriculture county. Every land purchase gets a notice about that. So it's very important to us to have a long-range conservation ag working landscape plan. And so having said that, I'd also like to express our sincere appreciation to the DOC and the SGC staff. There are a few of Virginia and David and Ina, to name a few, that were very helpful to us in the Salk outreach that occurred this last cycle in Modesto is where we attended that, and that was very helpful, so thank you. Mariposa County Ag Working Landscape Conservation Plan is very important. We're dedicated to the long-term viability of ag working landscape in the community. We think this will assist the county to establish the climate adaptation strategy, resiliency, and understand the carbon sequestration value and ecosystem co-benefit values of the Mariposa County ag working landscapes, which incidentally are roughly half the private lands in the county. The county is about 1,463 square miles, half of it's in public land. So we also have an envision of partnership with public lands as well. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we look forward to working on this important Salk program.
Thank you so much. Bob Hill.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Gordon and members of the council. I'm Bob Hill. I'm a staffer with the City of San Luis Obispo, where I lead our Office of Sustainability. Of the 31 conservation easement acquisition proposals, I believe we're the only local government in the pool being considered today. So I wanted to provide a few brief remarks from our perspective as local government. The 1,000-acre Miosi Brothers La Cuesta Ranch is not only contiguous with our municipal corporate boundary, but is also adjacent on all of its westerly side with California Polytechnic State University. And so we're optimistic that this project really has an outstanding opportunity for university-led education as well. For the City of San Luis Obispo, with the update of our open space element of our general plan in 1994, we formally created a Greenbelt Protection Program and have staffed and resourced that Greenbelt Protection Program. And in the 25 years since then, we've protected over 7,500 acres of land and created a proud land conservation legacy in our community that is paired also with properties in Williamson Act contracts and public lands as well. The 1,000 acres here is situated upstream of the city in the watershed, so that was intact. Watershed functions are important in a resilience perspective from catastrophic flooding, and then also as a critical buffer between the Los Padres National Forest and our city for wildfire. In 2014, the City of San Luis Obispo updated our land use elements and circulation elements of our general plan with funding from Strategic Growth Council, where we were able to affirm our commitment to compact urban form and infill development, as well as very ambitious transportation mode share split objectives. And our most recent planning effort right now that we're in the midst of is the update of our climate action plan. Our council has been very bold and ambitious and directed us as staff to prepare a climate action plan to achieve carbon neutrality by 2035. We know that's a really ambitious target, the most ambitious we're aware of. And so we're hopeful that with this planning grant, we'll be able to become a leadership city and help the state in its leadership goals as well. So thanks very much to the Growth Council for your consideration, and also to staff who've been very communicative and professional throughout all of this. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Dan, I'm assuming this is you. Sorry that I can't read your last name.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just real quick before you start, I won't start your time yet. You're going to be followed by Jeremiah Leibowitz and Nancy Schaefer. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Chair Gordon and council members, thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you our recommendation that you've recommended, actually. My name is Dan Dungy. I'm with the San Benito Agricultural Land Trust. We're a small agricultural land trust in San Benito County, which is it's the last frontier for development for the Silicon Valley, and they're heading that way. Most of our Class 1 soils in the northern part, and that's where they're coming and starting to develop. We really appreciate your support on this. Besides the jeopardy that's involved with that, the particular landowner that we're working with, Phil Foster and his wife of Foster Ranches, Pinnacle Farms Organics, this will allow them to complete their whole home ranch into a conservation easement. They're very supportive of the conservation easement programs, and they'd like their whole goal is to have farming in perpetuity on their land. They employ 70 full-time people and several seasonal people, and this is just another for not only economic benefit, but especially in a jeopardy county like we're in, to support us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I do it, Jeremiah.
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon, and to the council. Jeremiah Leibowitz, representing the California Rangeland Trust. And same here, my paragraphs have significantly dwindled. But I think the point that I wanted to make on behalf of the Rangeland Trust is it's been talked about kind of the origin of the Salk program, 10 years running. And the Rangeland Trust has been a part of that partnership since the inception. And one characteristic that was evident at the beginning, which continues now and hopefully is something that continues as this program moves forward, is the willingness of the program to reach out to the stakeholders and ask for their input. It is not common. That does not happen across the board with the various state agencies that provide conservation easement funding. And it's been a critical component of our work with the team, what I'd call kind of a hallmark characteristic. The staff has been praised for their work. I will tell you, the DOC staff, I believe it was Board Member Crowfoot earlier who made a comment about, that he felt that you all have become the best practice in grant making on climate. And I just wish that there was a way to extrapolate what you all have achieved at the DOC and management of this Salk to the other state programs that are managing easement projects. One of our projects was put up there. We made a run at putting projects in Calaveras County on the map. We submitted 7 applications. We were awarded 5, so thank you very much for that. And some of those landowners are going to be here and get a chance to speak a little bit later. In total, over our 20-year history, we've conserved about 330,000 acres, and the comments have been made that the consistency of the funding is critical to enable us to continue to talk to landowners. I can tell you the demand signal is strong. Just on our active project list right now, we have projects that represent an additional 225,000 acres across the state that we're trying to help landowners protect. So really appreciate the consistency of the funding. And then again, last comment with respect to the support from the Salk program. In the 10 years that we've been able to partner with you, really appreciative. You've supported us now approaching about $30 million of easement funding, which has been significant. So thank you.
Thank you. You're all doing such a good job staying on time. I really appreciate it. Nancy, I have you, but I have you followed by Chester Murphy and Katie Patterson. Go ahead.
Right, yes, Chester is one of our landowners whose project was featured up here.
Perfect.
I'm Nancy Schaefer, the California Rangeland Trust. I just wanted to build a little bit on what Jeremiah said. Before the Salk program, funding for rangeland and farmland conservation easements had significantly dwindled, and that has changed with this program. Based on the slides, 92,000 acres have been conserved, and with this approval, be an additional 20,000 acres. So that's huge, and that's been a big benefit to the Rangeland Trust and our landowners. And these projects match and fit well with the Salk goals of climate change, adaptation, resiliency, avoided greenhouse gas emissions, but also a lot of co-benefits, watershed integrity, groundwater recharge, water quality, water supply, wildlife habitat, wildlife corridors. I could go on, but I won't. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chester.
Hello, Chairman and Board. I'm Chester Murphy. I'm one of the landowners. I'm here with my brother. We have the 3,100 acre property in Calaveras County. We've owned that property since 1913. My brother and I are third generation owners of that property. And with this program, this particular property we have is about 30 miles from Stockton. So it's just into Calaveras County. And from the view shed, you can see downtown Stockton. You can see the other communities. And so that's what's being preserved. There's also, alongside of it, is bordered a current subdivision. So this property's been in rangeland and cattle. And with this program, it'll allow it to continue to do that. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much. All right, I have Katie, and I'm just going to have her followed by the last 3 cards, which are Mike. I'm not even going to try to read this last name, from California Farmland Trust, Sharon from San Luis Obispo Land Conservancy, and Carolee Brown from Institute for Local Government.
Wow, thank you so much for allowing me to take these 2 minutes and hopefully less at the podium here. My name is Katie Patterson. I'm the California Policy Manager for American Farmland Trust. We're a national ag land conservation organization, and we're really excited because we are, proposing a project here for your consideration. So that's one reason to be excited. But another is just the work that the staff across the board. Everybody said it. We're echoing that. DOC, SGC. It's been phenomenal. And I want to talk about the planning dollars. And Jeannie so eloquently came up here and talked about how that is critically important. And a lot of the work that American Farmland Trust does is focuses on the San Joaquin Valley and the communities there and the opportunities with the planning agencies and local governments. And every opportunity we have, we're talking about this program. We're talking about the planning opportunity because ag mitigation is not something that is done universally across the board. And folks need to start understanding how this is more of an asset and not a burden for how they plan and think about the future growth of their communities. So I just wanted to reiterate that work, and that we'll continue to beat that drum and also continue to point people towards technical assistance because it's really needed out there. The other piece that I want to talk about is just the inspiration out of this room today, the family projects here, the collaboration of different land trusts in this room. Some are agricultural land trusts, some aren't. It doesn't matter. This is a great program and people are recognizing it. But I also want to talk about our space as a national organization. New York, our New York region of AFT sees this program, is learning about this program, and they're pushing a similar program in their legislature. So what California is doing here is really inspiring others to take action around climate issues, outside of its boundaries. So I think that's really cool, and all of you should be recognized for that work that you guys have done, including the staff at this level. And then also, I just want to make a quick nod to our staff here. We have a conservation program manager and our policy associate that just started with us about a week and a half ago, Lauren and Justin, and they are just, hungry to do this work. And so I'm glad that they could join us today for these projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mike, I love your handwriting. It's just unreadable, but it's super cool looking.
It's like hieroglyphs.
Yeah, that's
The last name is Machado.
Well, Chairman Gordon, council members, and a special hello to Director Ross. She and I go back to another life where we worked together. I took note of the slide that came up that talked about the interrelationship of what we're doing with farmland easements and trying to affect infill and other actions within the urban area. In another life, I introduced a flood control legislation that focused on trying to prevent urban development in flood control and keep the farmland there because of the benefits it would provide to urban areas in the prevention of floods and helping to control floods. And I'd also like to talk about some of the additive benefits that come about of putting your farm into an easement. My father put his ranch that he had grew up on into a farmland trust and easement, and that was the last signature in his life to make that happen because he wanted to make sure that all that he worked for would still be there and would not be taken away. My family has an application before you today, but one of the things that I have found that we were able to get from having our property in an easement and the benefits that come about from that is the ability to participate in programs like SWEEP and Healthy Soils programs that work for carbon sequestration, irrigation efficiency. It also allows people to invest in equipment for greater tillage efficiency that reduces trips across the field, that reduce further greenhouse gas emissions. And you're also looking at some programs that the state is championing now, such as sustainable groundwater management. Keeping land in agriculture helps foster that. If you're in a floodplain, keeping the land in agriculture really is a benefit to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And the bottom line, too, it helps maintain family farms and ranchers, and it helps facilitate intergenerational transfers. So I want to applaud you, all of you, for the efforts that you put forward to be able to fund the program for the conservation easements of farmland and ranch land. Because without that, we wouldn't necessarily be building for the future of our children and their children. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very well said. Give that one a round of applause. Sharon, hi. Sharon. Sharon, then Carolee. It's okay, either way.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Gordon, members of the council. Sharon Gonzalez, I'm here today on behalf of the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you and the staff for their support of the Salk program in San Luis Obispo County, as well as all of California. This year, we were fortunate to be recommended for funding towards 3 conservation easements in our county, and this support will be instrumental in protecting more than 800 acres in over 3 family ranches. These projects protect longstanding agricultural lands, incredible natural vistas, critical wildlife habitat, and important portions of our coastal watersheds. And we would urge you to approve the funding for all the projects as recommended by staff. The Salk program continues to be an instrumental partner and funding source for agricultural conservation easements in San Luis Obispo County. Nearly 2,000 acres of land conservancy projects have been protected because of the Salk program, and we can point to 9,000 acres more that will soon be permanently protected because of Salk. And on another note, just wanted to end by saying, like, the staff is always so fantastic. We come up here a couple of times a year, and they make themselves available for projects, as well as talk about hurdles and possible problems that we might have and help us with hurdles, overcome them. So thank you again, and
Thank you so much. Carolee, you get the last word.
Hello, my name is Carly Brown, and I'm a director with the Institute for Local Government. And on behalf of ILG and the City of Arcata, I would like to thank you for your consideration for Arcata's Salk Planning Grant application. As you saw on one of the slides that Louise presented earlier, the City of Arcata is one of the 12 participants in the Boost pilot program. This application was one of our first acts of technical assistance through that program. So the award will allow the City of Arcata to develop a specific plan that will be informed by meaningful public engagement based on ILG's Tiers Public Engagement Framework. This plan will shape the city's future growth and will provide additional opportunities for high-density infill development and housing, which will most likely result in the conservation of valuable agricultural lands. So we are very excited about the opportunities in the City of Arcata, and this award will most certainly serve as a valuable foundation for great things to come out of the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who spoke. It was really moving and really wonderful to hear all those individual stories and projects. So thank you. And I just, I don't know how many times we heard how great your staff is, but they're great, apparently. So thank you. And I just want to give a special plug also to Secretary Ross and also to Undersecretary Jenny Lester-Moffitt from CDFA, who really do represent the needs and the values of the agricultural community of the state incredibly well here in Sacramento and are just a joy to work with. And you are well represented by both of these organizations, so thank you. Up on the dais, that was a lot of information. Questions, comments, thoughts?
First of all, these are another round of really great projects. And I want to thank the landowners in particular for coming to share that value that they put on this. But I also want to say kudos to all of our staff and to all of us for the willingness to continue to adjust the program as we learn more and being willing to put some funding into technical assistance into pilot projects. I think that when we're trying to do something that isn't being done someplace else, it's important that we all give ourselves that space and to learn from that. And I think the payoff to finally see more planning grants is only going to fill our pipeline and our hearts even more. So I just really appreciate how everyone's worked so hard to continue to provide these opportunities to find new and better ways of doing these programs. And I think that's going to pay off really, really well. So thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for all your work on these issues. Anyone down here? Mike?
I just also want to thank everyone for coming. I know it's not easy to get here, so thank you for taking the time, and it has an impact. So thank you for that. Thank you for feeding us. Thank you for being good stewards of the land. Thank you for applying, and then thank you for your feedback, both on staff, but then also on the process. We're proud up here that we have the opportunity to provide these funds to you. And so thank you for that. I have 2 questions. I'm from Southern California, so when I was flying up, I've got my map on my laptop, and I'm trying to see, and it's impossible, right, because it's foggy and everything. And and then Yosemite's in the background, so I'm looking there, to be honest. But but trying to follow along, and then I know when fly home, I'll try to do the same. But by the time my seat back is in its upright and locked position, there won't be any more grants awarded once we start to head towards Southern California. And it's not a critique of your efforts, but I want to give you the opportunity to explain it, because I know you've put a lot of effort into trying to get more applicants and more awards in Southern California. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that process.
It's been really difficult. We've really picked up our outreach there. It sounds like landowners in Southern California are really interested in fee title acquisitions more than they are in conservation easements. It sounds like the degree of the development pressure requires that they look for more money than through the easement. The other issue seems to be water. It's priced differently in San Diego County. I think it's at municipal prices. So I think there's a lot of factors, a lot of different factors. I think AFT a few years ago tried to do a kind of comprehensive study about this, but it does continue to evade us, and we want to see projects from that area. So if folks have ideas about how we can better do outreach or reach landowners who may be interested, we would love to hear about that.
A totally different question. On the land use conversion threat, how does that work, where there's a risk option and then a number? I didn't really...
Sure. So we have right now in the program 9 risk options, and there are risk options for so let me see, hang on a second. I got a long list. So basically applicants have to demonstrate that ag lands within the project's geographic area are at risk of conversion. We have, as I said, 9 risk options, and those the applicant selects one. The Department of Conservation will let them know if they didn't, if we don't think that they picked the most appropriate one. But basically, that risk option indicates the type of development that property would likely be converted into if it were converted. And that helps us figure out how many greenhouse gases are avoided by the completion of the project. And so we've done a lot of work with the California Air Resources Board on creating that quantification methodology. Actually, it's really them. They're smart people over there, so.
Thanks, Mike. That was actually my question too. The Northland Regional Land Trust folks did bring up that question of sort of how do you think about risk, and just to the point of the program, which we all know, which is really it's conservation with an eye toward more dense growth in other places, right? So how do we think about that relationship between infill and conservation, and that question about threats is really goes to that. So thank you for answering that. Just to the folks up here, we do have opportunities to look at the guidelines for this program, and it's something to think about whether that's clear enough, whether we can think about how those risk factors can really be stated as clearly as possible and really be kind of aligned with the overall values is something to think about, I think, as we're going forward. Any other questions up here? All right, I'm going to call for a vote, but before I do, because I don't want everyone just getting up and leaving when we vote, after we vote, I will say that those who can stay to hear about high-speed rail, I highly recommend, because... That was Brian Kelly clapping over there. No, because it goes right through that map that we just saw, and there's a lot of a strong relationship to the extent that high-speed rail actually funds a position at SGC focused on conservation, so we do pay a lot of attention to it. Also for Regions Rise, which is also very relevant to all the work you're doing from the perspective of how the state's thinking about planning overall. So if you can, highly recommend everybody staying. So with that, are we ready to call a vote here? And the recommended action again is to approve staff recommendation to award almost $57 million in fiscal year 18 to 19 funds to support 31 agricultural easements, 6 planning grants through round 5 of the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program, or Salk.
Need a motion?
Yes, I do.
So moved.
All right, let's do a roll call. Doug? Amanda?
Yes.
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 So moved. Thank you, everybody. One more thing from
I
Virginia.
just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for your kind words. Thank you for making the journey, and that we're so grateful for your participation in the program, for you coming today, and that also if you have time to stick around after this, after the high-speed rail presentation, we also have a giant check that we can. So we're going to be bringing that to the lobby for a photo op, and we'd really love to have folks participate. So we'll meet you in the bright room to the left out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, it's a whiteboard check, so I don't think that it is not legal tender. I'm sorry to say. But it's very cool. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much. We are going to move to, and I don't see Brian. I see Meg. Oh, there he is, Brian Kelly from High Speed Rail Authority, Meg Calderth from the High Speed Rail Authority. Thank you for being here. We're excited to hear an update on high speed rail.
I apologize. There must be rampant confusion because I was just here to get a big check. And, a really big check.
Your check is bigger than all their checks, Brian.
I need a really big check.
A really big check. We know you need it.
Do you know I appreciate the opportunity to be here before you. I want to apologize in advance for my voice. My two college kids came home, and they came home with two things. One, demand for more money, and two, colds. And so now my wife and I have colds, so I apologize for my voice. Anyway, I'm very pleased to be here and just give you all an update on where we are on the California High-Speed Rail project. I've been the CEO at the authority since February of 2018, and I'm very pleased with the direction of the program, where we're going. It is the most sustainable transportation project I've ever been associated with, I've ever seen, and by other measures, and Meg Cederoth, who is my planning director and will do the second part of this presentation, can attest to, by others who judge such things, we're being judged well. So I want to say that about the project, and there's a lot of conversation and controversy going on around the project in terms of where we're starting and what it looks like. I'm here to tell you it's more advanced than I think most people realize, and that's what I'm going to walk through with you. I also will certainly welcome any and all questions. So just getting into this, the first part about what we do is it's outlined in the law. Voters of California passed a bond in 2008 and asked us to initiate construction of a high-speed train system that utilizes both an alignment and a technology where we are capable of sustained speeds of 200 miles per hour or greater. And that is an important part of our mission, because the only way that you can achieve that kind of speed is through electrification. So several years ago, there was a lot of work done in California, certainly under the prior administration, and I think leading into this administration, consistent with the goals of this administration, is to modernize rail and public transit so that faster, cleaner, more seamless and better connected to provide service. And we think we're a big part of that. So it's worth noting that in 2008, when the voters passed the bond bill, they provided $9 billion for what was then estimated to be a $45 billion project. So we got about 20% of what we needed to. And the reason I want to make that point is because we don't have all the money we need to build all of the San Francisco to LA Anaheim stretch. We've got some. And so we, like any other entity that's building a transit or rail project, we have to build this in building blocks. And that's really what we're talking about now. What's the first segment? That's what we're working through now. My board adopted 3 principles that guide our decisions as we move forward. 1, we initiate high-speed rail service in California as soon as possible. And again, high speed, 200 miles per hour. Make strategic concurrent investments that will be linked over time and provide mobility, economic and environmental benefits at the earliest possible. And then we position ourselves to construct additional segments as funding becomes available. So that's the building block approach that we. The map on the right here, just along with this mission statement and principles, just taking a look at it, the blue on that route map is the phase one, the first phase that we are to build under the bond bill, San Francisco to Los Angeles and Anaheim. Yellow is what's considered phase two, which are extensions from the Central Valley north to Sacramento and from Anaheim through the Inland Empire south into San Diego. So where are we today? I think this is the sort of worst kept, maybe the best kept secret about where we are. There's a lot of talk about the 119 miles in the valley, but we got to talk about what's happening in California on the transformation of rail. That's really the story here. This map is our status check in 2020. So on the north end in the Bay Area, we are funders of the electrification of the Caltrain system between San Francisco and San Jose. That project is under construction today, and the California High-Speed Rail Authority has provided about $715 million for that project. The middle part, the green in the middle there, is the Merced to Bakersfield stretch. That's 171 miles, all electrified, connecting three of the fastest growing cities in California, Merced, three of the fastest growing counties in California. And so what's proposed there is to take the 119-mile stretch that we started on back in 2012-13 and extend it to the full 171 connecting these major cities. Before, the route was Madera to a place called Poplar Avenue, which is north of Bakersfield and in an orchard, and Madera that has a station, but not a lot of connecting points to other transit. So by extending the full 171, you get into the city areas of these towns. We get out of the orchard at Poplar Avenue into Bakersfield. We go into downtown Fresno, and we would propose to be going into downtown Merced, where we will meet the ACE system that goes to the Bay Area and the San Joaquins that continues north. The dotted lines on this picture are where we are still finishing the environmental work, the environmental documents for the phase one system, San Francisco, LA, Anaheim. So now I'm going to move forward to what this looks like in 24 months. In 2022, our status is now this. Again, we're getting close to the end of construction between San Francisco and San Jose. We are in full construction on the 171 in the Central Valley. Importantly, we will have completed all of the environmental work in the next 18 to 24 months for all of phase one, San Francisco to Anaheim. I have to talk about, in Southern California, that green line coming east to west there, which is an emerging project that has gotten real in a hurry. And I want to talk about that for a minute. This is the proposed Virgin train line, which is a 180-mile stretch between Victorville and Las Vegas. And it's been sitting around for a long time. And then recently, there's been a change of ownership for the entities that would run that system, and a commitment to run it with electrified high-speed rail away from diesel passenger service. And with those two commitments, we view ourselves as partners on this project because we want the electrified high-speed rail. 130 miles of this is in California. The entity that owns it now and will operate it are known and respected entities in transportation. It's Brightline Trains, who runs a train service in Florida, and Virgin, who is, Virgin Atlantic Air, Virgin America Air, has credibility in the transportation world. They are now actively pursuing commencing construction on this project. They're hoping to break ground in 2020, and they see a 4 to 5 year construction segment. So why is this important to us? Under my bond direction and my mission, I got to build San Francisco to Anaheim, but the connecting point for us is the city of Palmdale, which is in northern LA County. And we're looking forward to getting the Virgin trains extended from Victorville to Palmdale, which is money they can spend, but we want to help. And then Palmdale becoming a connecting point, not just for north-south service, but ultimately service going east to Las Vegas, and being the nation's first interstate high-speed rail system, electrified and high-speed. The other great opportunity about the emergence of the Virgin train is that I don't have funding to fill the gaps right now between Merced and San Jose and Bakersfield and Anaheim. But with the emergence of a private partner who's interested in utilizing similar infrastructure, perhaps putting our capitalization together, we can find ways to build those assets and get that. So it's an exciting emergence of a private player. It's a demonstration of the private interest in electrified high-speed rail, and we think a game changer in bringing the electrified high-speed rail into Southern California. Just quickly, I'll jump through this quickly, but I mentioned the importance of that Virgin Train system. We have entered an MOU with Virgin Trains to consider things like how we might work together toward extending their service to Palmdale, how we might work together on procuring things like rail cars or equipment we both might need, and making sure that we have opportunities for interoperability. Someday they may want to run on our tracks and we may want to run on theirs. And so we work that through today now to sort of work through those possibilities. This is the schedule of our environmental documents, and just so everybody's clear, we are operating under a federal funding agreement. We have received federal money ready for this project, and so we have to get some civil works done in the valley to meet our agreement, and we have to complete the environmental work for all segments of high speed. I'm pleased to say that in October, just 2 months ago, we did complete and achieve the ROD for the extension to downtown Bakersfield. It's the first ROD approved in 5 years. And as you can see, by this schedule, we have now a very aggressive schedule to move forward on the environmental work for each of the following segments. We will have draft documents out in 2020. My board has already approved, put out the draft environmental documents, and our schedule for certifying the ROD is in that third column, those dates. Under our federal grant agreement, we have to finish the environmental work for all of these by the end of December 22. That's the amount of float time we have to get that done and meet our agreements. It's important to know that while a lot of our money is focused in the Central Valley because that's where we started construction, we are spending money all over the state and we are invested in important projects. LA Union Station, we are signed up to add $441 million of our dollars to that, and the idea there is to modernize that station. Regional, local rail, and ultimately high-speed rail will have easy in and out access at that station, and not be stuck with having to go in one way and come out one way, but have a circular run-through that will enable us all to expand. We are funding entirely the environmental work between Burbank and Anaheim, which is important because it's not just for us. It also lays out how we will electrify and work with other passenger rails down there for Metrolink and Losan, which is the service that we're funding an important grade separation in Los Angeles called Marquardt, and there's $400 million, almost $400 million in Southern California. Today, we're in for about $1.3 billion. Similarly, in Northern California, in addition to the work we're doing in the Valley, we're investors to the tune of about $1.6 billion, mostly for the Caltrain electrification project, but also to complete the environmental work for expanded services for both them and us between Gilroy and San Francisco. Also, like in LA, they've got about $543 million for connectivity. It's an important chart that throws a lot of numbers at you, but it does show, a driving investment into this project comes from cap and trade. We get about 25% cap and trade revenues on an annual basis. And, my recollection when I was, working issues is that we wanted it to have an economic benefit, we wanted it to focus on, wanted to have an environmental benefit, and these numbers reflect 4% of the dollars we spend are dispatched, more than 3,200 labor workers. We have 539 small businesses participating. Most of them are California firms. I think we're doing very good by the cap and trade goals. Just some quick numbers. The work that we've started in the Central Valley has paid pretty important dividends for the state. 42,600 job years of employment have been developed just for the work we're doing largely in the Valley, $3 billion in wages. And having spent about $4.2 billion just in the Valley, our economic output is about double that, almost $8 billion. Proud of the impact we had. 2019 was a big year for us. We did a lot of things that we're happy about, reached a lot of goals and objectives. Housing project, which provided new Valley. We elected a new board chair, Lenny Mendonça, and work closely with. Great addition to our board. We had to move Highway 99 in the Central Valley to make room for the train, and that was a very successful budget. As I said, we reached 500 small businesses working. So again, there's a lot of momentum, and we're looking forward to continuing that momentum as we go forward. Most recently, as I mentioned, we finished certifying the record of decision to allow us to get into Bakersfield, and we work closely with the city of Bakersfield on the relocation agreement for their homeless shelter. Big things coming up in 2020 for us, which you will certainly hear about. My guess is there will be some conversation about will be our 2020 business plan, which we will submit a draft to the legislature and to the public in February, on February 10th, and we'll move toward a final of that on May 1st, 2020. And we look forward to adopting or certifying our next record of decision. And that would allow us to have the entire 171 mile cleared environmentally by some. We're also very proud of what we've done in the sustainability, recyclable, and general. I'm proud that we appointed Meg Cederoth this year to be our Director of Planning and Sustainability. Served in a consultant role for some time, mostly focused on bigger role, come over to the authority officially and work with us on both planning. Building the right thing for them as we get to there. I'm going to ask Meg to come up and roll through the second part of this, and then of course we're happy to answer.
Might have to lower this. So thanks for your time today. This has been a really enlightening session listening to all the folks coming forward with the Salk grants, because there's a very clear alignment between sort of what we're trying to achieve in implementing the high-speed rail system and really connect the communities in California. And that works really well in synergy with some of the grant programs that you all have been instrumental in pushing, getting to our communities. I think I'm speaking to the choir, certainly when it comes to talking about how California is a leader on sustainability issues, right? Really taking some key forward-looking steps relative to achieving climate goals, and not just in the mitigation space, but the adaptation space as well. And high-speed rail has been a part of that program for, well over the past decade, included in the scoping plans and as well in the adaptation plans for California. And we've been, I think this is going to be an extremely familiar slide to folks here. You can, on the left, there's kind of the host of GHG and GGRF programs, and then on the right, as I'm looking at it, is high-speed rail. And you know that embedded within that number is mode shift between not just automobiles and people shifting out of their cars for long-distance trips, but also really tackling the air sector and moving people off of the short-haul flights between San Jose and the LA Basin and putting them on clean, electric, high-speed rail. It's really a unique transportation investment that has proven around the world that it's competitive with air travel and really does capture that market. We see it as a key part of, adding resiliency and redundancy to California's transportation network. It's also really the backbone, the electrified spine of rail in California. This is a map I know probably Chad Edison has spoken to you about a number of times, really High-speed rail works when it's connected seamlessly with the existing diesel service, and as Brian was laying out, connecting with new electrified service in the state as well. And so we really see achieving high-speed rail as really part and parcel to integrating with the overall modernization of the state rail network. You know, I want to focus on this slide for a moment. I think it's pretty obvious for the very savvy folks in the room who are used to dealing with greenhouse gas emissions and air quality emissions. You know, we have fielded a number of questions of late from folks who think it might be acceptable to just leave the valley with diesel rail service, slightly faster diesel rail service. And, you know, certainly because of progressive regulation, we've seen a lot of improvement in diesel locomotive technology, certainly relative to air quality. But you know, if you are foregoing electrified high-speed rail service, true high-speed rail service, you're also foregoing 2 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emission savings annually. You know, with diesel come greenhouse gas emissions. So we do kind of want to emphasize that high-speed rail is really about a clean transportation mode for California's future. We know a lot of growth is coming to the state, and we need to maintain our economic development and mobility while protecting our important environmental resources. So just drawing a little bit of detail around the sustainability policy. I won't go into too much detail. We've talked about this before. We're very proud of our GRESB ranking, our GRESB infrastructure ranking. As Brian emphasized, you know, there is this idea that we will be looking for the private sector or other public institutional investors to do some investment in high-speed rail, and GRESB infrastructure is a sustainability benchmark that looks at our environmental, social, and governance indicators and gives us an annual ranking. We got 5 stars this year. We're very proud of this, a system that, you know, assesses us on these metrics. I always love a show of hands of people who have actually heard of this before, but I'm hoping Kate raises her hand. Yeah, great. Okay, perfect. You know, our policy has been comprehensive since for, you know, well over the past 8 years. And that comprehensive focus means we're not just waiting for the operation of the system, but we've looked really closely at construction as well. We committed early on to have all Tier 4 equipment or the best available equipment on the site, and the results of that are extremely positive. That means that our site is about 60% cleaner than your average construction site relative to air pollution and other toxics. We think this is really important when we're doing construction in the Central Valley really intensively. But we're not just, you know, first you reduce, so we're actually focused on all those measures that can actually reduce emissions, and then we look to offset. So we've worked very closely with the San Joaquin Air District to do all of the offsets for construction already. So essentially the air basin isn't seeing a difference, and that also means we have a cleaner construction site for our workers, which we have well over 3,500 now. Probably 50% of those we see coming from disadvantaged communities. So we're really seeing a good synergy relative to those investments. As Brian mentioned, right out of the gate, we committed to 100% recycling of all the concrete and steel from our construction site. Those are commodities that can be taken back up into the construction supply chain, so we saw no reason to throw those into landfills. We also set a 75% goal for all other construction waste. And the results have been really positive. We've achieved 100% for concrete and steel to date, and we are actually trending about 98% for all construction materials. That is a unique score for a project of this scale. That's 272,000 tons of material that we've avoided from landfill. So we're excited about recycling. It also has a good synergy with our small business goals because, you know, a number of the small businesses are winning contracts to do that recycling work. So they're able to add employees and then to change over their fleet as well because they're working on high-speed rail. It's kind of a great day to be here and hear all of the Salk awards. You know, we have committed to preservation and replacement of the agricultural lands that we're using to put high-speed rail on. To date, we've secured about 1,200 acres. We've also, across 7 sites, we've preserved and done habitat preservation and conservation on over 2,680 acres. I actually have a video on that. I think one of the unique aspects of this, and I bet Emily has spoken to you about this before, is that because we have a project of this scale, of this longevity, and of this size, we're actually able to look at those larger landscape level parcels that provide much richer habitat for important species. So with that, as long as everything works, get a little.
We are standing in Coyote Valley in Santa Clara, California. It's about a 7,400-acre valley floor area.
Located just 20 minutes south of San Jose and nestled between the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Diablo Range, Coyote Valley has been identified by the Santa Clara Open Space Authority as one of its most critically important conservation targets. Not only does its floodplains provide important flood protection for the region, but it is home to a dozen threatened or endangered plants and animals and serves as a migratory connection between the two mountain ranges for several species.
We have American badger, bobcat, mountain lion, black-tailed deer, gray fox.
But split across Highway 101, Coyote Valley already has migration challenges, something that could have potentially been compounded by high-speed rail.
And we're concerned because it could potentially exacerbate flooding issues and cause floodplain impacts. It could potentially cut off wildlife connectivity.
Concerns high-speed rail was ready to take on.
Serpentine's a globally unique and rare habitat type.
But not without some very important help.
Once we had done our initial concept of the design, and we had done the initial assessments of effects, we brought in and shared that transparently with stakeholder groups that have already been working on wildlife movement and its conservation in the Bay Area.
And then along this valley floor, we have two of the main tributaries to Fisher Creek.
This approach allowed environmental stakeholders to provide feedback, ask questions, and suggest changes in design, resulting in more wildlife crossings and other environmental mitigation.
Usually their first chance to really provide opportunity on the project is after the initial designs have been developed and a draft EIR or environmental document has been released. But this was a really novel approach.
The authority, I think, was really smart in doing that. It would be a lot more work later on to try to change the engineering designs.
High-speed rail has been around for decades. High-speed rail has just not been around in the United States.
This collaborative approach recently took center stage at the International Conference on Ecology and Transportation, which brought expertise from around the world to Sacramento.
And from this, you can tell which direction the animal's going.
Generally, the process has resulted in a lot more buy-in on local conservation agencies.
So it's just had better project planning and design all around.
We all want to make a good project. And so doing the right thing and incorporating these and also other environmental avoidance mitigations is important to us personally because we want the project to succeed.
The Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority says working with high-speed rail on these wildlife crossings could ultimately leave Coyote Valley better for its inhabitants than it is now.
Currently, we're seeing a lot of problems with wildlife moving through the valley. These underpasses could potentially solve a lot of these issues for the long term for wildlife.
Really hard to follow the bobcat and the coyote, but I'm gonna press on. I'm gonna wrap up with a couple of slides about planning, which, as Brian emphasized, is a role I've taken on earlier this year. The system really serves as an organizing principle for growth in California. We know where it's headed in the valley, and I think that, unique among interregional transportation investments, the system can reinforce compact growth patterns centered in these urban areas, especially once we get out of the orchard and into. So, that is really should help minimize the development pressure that we're seeing on our natural and working lands that we need to be delivering ecosystem services. Protecting our economy as well through the ag industry. So in your review of sustainable communities investments, I think you understand the interplay and the reliance that transit systems have on surrounding development. I think when it comes to riders, high-speed rail is incredibly greedy about getting millions of people living within a 1-mile radius of this station. We want them to be able to easily walk, bike, scoot, skateboard and get to our system as easily as possible. I think we appreciate the synergy of the funding that GGRF brings to those local communities relative to active transportation as well. That first mile, last mile access work is something my team is starting to undertake now in some of the stations in the Central Valley where we'll be headed first. And then as well, we are keenly aware that the long-term accomplishment of state climate goals does depend on, system access and getting people to this train, and then also catalyzing the type of development around and within the station area. Right? The more we can bring destinations closer together within the station site, we can start to shave some of those daily trips that people have to do. And that's kind of the intractable greenhouse gas emissions / VMT issue that we have. So we do appreciate how, very good partnership with local municipalities and good planning within the station area can start to really catalyze that development. To date, high-speed rail the authorities actually provided $10 million in planning to the station cities to actually do the type of regulatory change for their plans to be able to receive high-speed rail and to make sure their zoning and their codes are up to date. And to date, Bakersfield, Fresno, and Palmdale have completed that work. And those plans have emphasized how the station can really create these hubs of activities and help adjust the underlying zoning and codes to make sure that we're getting the type of development that's actually commensurate and corresponds to the investment we're making as a state. So those plans are the necessary regulatory structure to enable that denser development, but there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still some holes and gaps. I think you do appreciate that some of these cities, the market is a little bit weak. It's not quite ready to deliver the type of development we're looking for. And so we've been really appreciative of the opportunity to work with other state agencies. AGON, I know, is going to be doing a presentation in just a minute on Regions Rise Together, but we appreciate that through these partnerships we can actually look towards some tools to help fill that gap. So our vision is for stations that not only provide a really attractive entry point into the system to make journeys possible across the state, but also are destinations in and of themselves and help to catalyze that infill development and city building that is really the heart and soul of why this project is going to transform California.
Thanks, you guys. Questions, comments, thoughts about high-speed rail from up here? That was awesome.
And just tell me where to go to get the big check.
Yeah. I like your new presentation. I've seen you, it's really good. Yeah.
Great numbers.
Yeah.
So a lot of work was done in the valley with landowners, and I just want you to know how much that's appreciated. There's still people who talk about the relationship building that is carrying them through. So this is a great presentation. I would love for you to give it in front of several of our statewide farm organizations. You've got great numbers, great story. It's enlightening.
Thank you again for the presentation. This is my second time seeing a similar presentation, and it gets better each time. So I
brought Meg.
But I just wanted to echo the obviously the importance of this project, all the work that we do here, and I guess also maybe suggest, Meg, I know we've talked about this a little bit, but it would be great to hear a little bit of your thoughts on how the council or key staff of the SGC can really engage. Particularly, I'm interested in some of the station area work, but obviously on the Salk side as well. But if you have any thoughts.
I wouldn't say I have tremendous profound thoughts at the moment, but I think one of the important things for us is to make sure that we all work together to have the most up-to-date information on each of these station areas. We've done a lot of work with these communities, as have many of your staff. And so I think the more that we can consult with one another and understand what the immediate needs are relative to planning or housing or other type of investment, that would be crucial to actually.
I'd just add one thing. In my prior life, I served on this board. I know how important the grants are that are trying to do the right thing and try to build it. I guess what I would say is I would just hope that we have very close coordination on these things, because I do think the joining our forces can make sure the state is speaking with one voice on what we're looking for. Really work together to
I did have something on that because of the big water issues that are impacting the Central Valley and the implementation of SGMA. So the land use issues surrounding that, if there is going to be significant fallowed acreage, making sure that we can be smart and strategic and understand where the greatest habitat values are, where the greatest opportunities for renewable energy are. And they are so under-resourced in the county planning offices. So there's been a lot of conversation through our development of a water resiliency portfolio with the implementation of SGMA. How do we bring all of these equally compelling, but they all help us on our climate challenge together in a way that perhaps is a summit for land use planners and local boards of supervisors, and really thinking about how important it is for, as you said, to speak with one voice, because the goals that we're trying to achieve are for everyone in the state, but we happen to be in a place maybe to help bring alignment to it. It seems to me with the water work, with this, and with the work here, there might be some really positive opportunities.
It is just to add to these voices, high-speed rail is one of those big state projects that's connecting many, many parts of the state and many issues of the state. So in some ways, it's sort of the physical manifestation of many of the things we talk about up here. So I think it's a great point. How do we think about it, station area planning as a way to bring together a number of our infill goals and our VMT reduction goals, and then also the outside of the station area, in between station planning, bringing together many of our conservation goals is a really great point. So thank you for bringing that up. And something I know we're all talking about all the time, but it's helpful to me. And I echo, I think you guys should give this to the cabinet. I think it's a great presentation just to get folks in general understanding where we actually are with the project, what the reality is, and the relationship between this work and everybody else's work is incredibly important because it's just still not totally there for some people. So this is, I think, a great
we've just,
education.
we've just started these kind of periodic presentations. Happy to do this one. I think getting toward your comments, Karen, is for us to come back at the appropriate time. There's other things that we will be doing going forward, like where's important part on where are important places on our right-of-way. A lot of consistent conversations here about how we project, but will also help.
We also have to power that train with something. So there's that conversation.
There's that, yes.
Go ahead, Mike.
And just happy to help in any way that I can with the LA story. With that little line there between Palmdale and Anaheim is 88 cities, and
yes.
It's very tough to get to those. But we all get together through League of California Cities and through other groups, and I think timing is perfect for folks to be.
Thank you. I'll be down at SCAG in February, and we'll go through this and so look forward.
It's a small line, but there's a whole lot of people in there.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Oh, down there, yeah.
Slightly, this is, sorry, my voice is terrible. In terms of those sort of first mile, last mile conversations, I was wondering if you're already connected to the autonomous vehicle conversation. And by that laugh, I'm guessing maybe.
No, I chuckle because the autonomous vehicle conversation is certainly an ongoing conversation. And when I first got engaged in it, I was wearing a different hat and working regulations to get that going in California. I do think, I've been asked before, gee, do you think autonomous vehicles are competitive to high-speed rail? My answer to that is no. Supplementary to high-speed rail. I think that technology for exactly that first and last mile service, and I foresee a day in the future where somebody is buying their ticket on high-speed rail via their phone, and it's not just going from one station to that station, but they're using it to get from their house to whatever their meeting place is, all through one purchase, all through their phone. That's the conversation we want to continue to have.
Smarter and more expertise-minded people than I am connecting those topics.
Thank you. That was great. And we just have a lot of big planning happening today. It's very exciting. That's why we're here. I'm going to turn it over to even more big planning from Aegon Turpin, who's working at SGC and with OPR and GoBiz on the Regions Rise project, which has a lot of synergies with both the other things we just heard about.
And in the spirit, hi, good afternoon. In the spirit of big planning, I'm going to try to have big ideas and go quickly because I know we're at the very end of our time here. And just wanted to share a little bit about an initiative. A number of you have been involved with it, or your agencies have been involved. And of course, Chair Gordon has been one of the leads of this actual initiative, as I'll say. So what I wanted to do today was really just very high level talk about what it is, what has this initiative been about, what has been the focus of it, a little bit of what we've done in 2019, and more specifically, what is it we're trying to do in 2020. This is a big idea, and it's a big idea about regionalism, and all of your agencies touch regions, touch places. SGC, of course, touches places, and that's what we just came to, but the idea of how does a state as big as California really conceive of itself as a state of regions that are very, very different from each other, but regions that really, like with high-speed rail, are much more effective when linked together. And so a question I'm going to start with, but if we have time to discuss, is to what extent are your agencies looking at your work from the scale of how are the different regions of California affected, and what can your agencies do to help promote and strengthen those places as regions? And as we'll see, some of those are regions that are more on a natural ecosystem basis, and some are more regions from a kind of commute shed traditional economic lens. But the high level, I think that we're all aware of, that the state is growing quickly, but increasingly interconnected. And so this is a graphic we like to use to show what's happening in California, sort of the overlapping commute shed. So we have a series of regions in California. We do regional planning. We have metropolitan planning organizations, but a lot of the boundaries, people's lives are inhabiting across the boundaries of these places. And that's sort of the starting point, that we're inhabiting much bigger areas. We have, as I said, have to really think of California as a series of regions. And there's a way that we define them by state agencies. Caltrans has a series of districts, which is another way of looking at the state through regions. Community colleges have regions. There are regions related to the judicial system, and so each of your agencies may also have ways of organizing the state. This initiative is not about defining those, but it's trying to understand that we really have to align some of our work to those naturally occurring regions. And some of those are based on people factors, commute sheds, housing markets, and some of them are natural resource based or on the system level. And part of this is the idea of how does California really take the apparatus of state government and working with the various parts of the state to affect policy change on the ground at the scale of a region. This is a watershed map, not a particular region. But when the governor identified this as a strategic priority, it was also coming from a recognition of profound and growing inequality in California. And I think we all know very well the inequality that people are confronting in every community. But there's also a growing spatial and geographic inequality, particularly between the coast and inland parts of California, and a lot of ways to slice and dice this. This is just one looking at per capita income decline from a series of counties. And it's really quite staggering when you go back 40 years and think about how many counties were close to the state average, and parts of the Inland Empire and San Joaquin Valley have really dropped significantly. Part is because the coast has boomed so much and the growth of the knowledge economy and the high wages there. But that growing divide is something that when we see and we look at issues like housing and transportation costs, they're actually worse for a lot of inland regions. The share of spending that people have on transportation in inland areas is greater than what they're spending on housing, right? The housing crisis exists everywhere. And as I think we know, the cost crisis is very intertwined with the climate crisis. The areas where the fires have burned are places that people have often gone to try to find more affordable housing. And so looking at all of these is very much the work of SGC. It's the work of your agencies. And Regions Rise Together, it's kind of emerged out of that reality of recognizing that the spatial challenge, in part given this map. I know we talked earlier about the disadvantaged communities and the identification of how that's going to change over time. But this is really a stark map of showing very different parts of California. And to state the obvious again, high-speed rail goes right through the middle of that. And so the investments that we make and Strategic Growth Council is making in those places is part of that. We also began from the standpoint of saying that there's been a lot of attention at disparity, but we also really want to focus on assets. And part of the conversations we've had with regions have been about seeing all the incredible activities, new companies that are forming, investments that are being made in parts of California that not everyone is always aware of. UC Merced is obviously one of the most significant place-based economic development investments that has been made in decades in a part of California that had not had that kind of investment. And I know Strategic Growth Council is investing in some research programs there, and part of that, and really how that can be an anchor to really transform the place. Similarly, UC Riverside is in a place to be really transformative for the Inland Empire economy as well. And so that these are important parts of California. The Regions Rise Together emerges to say, how do we think about having a vision for economic development in California that's inclusive, that's sustainable, that looks at our interconnectivity, that looks at our interdependence. But it is not some big statewide planning program. It's really an initiative that got launched in partnership between the Governor's Office of Planning and Research with Chair Gordon and Lenny Mendonça, the head of GoBiz, but in partnership with external organizations. And so want to note that we did a significant amount of work with California Forward, which is a network of regional organizations and stewardship groups throughout California, and then CalCog, the organization that represents the councils of government, and Bill Higgins, I believe, is still here from the organization, and in fact want to recognize him and their organization because the logo we've used for Regions Rise Together comes from them. And it's important because this is about a partnership between the state and regions and the state and organizations that care and think about the regions of California. And the work that we did over the past year, or not even past year, from May to November, having very intensive conversations, almost day-long sessions in a number of parts of California, were done in partnership primarily with the whole network of groups that California Forward was a part of. I believe this one might be the Inland Empire, and some of your agencies and staff were involved in some of those conversations. So that was a way of going out and hearing from communities, what are the fundamental issues you're facing? But one of the most important ideas is, how do the regions come together to identify their own economic future? What are the particular ways that they can overcome some of the challenges that they're facing? And then what's a partnership with the state? We didn't show up in these communities with a major grant program. We didn't show up with, but as we know, there are a number of grant programs that exist across your agencies that can be aligned towards the regions. And so in some ways, this was a communications tool in how to think differently and how to work differently. And it really came around to these sort of three ideas that we tried to promote, which is we have to change, all of us sort of in our work, changing a mental map of California. We've kind of conceptualized California often in a way of knowing our individual communities well, but how we fit together, not as much. We have to really think differently about engaging with regions and supporting a regions up planning. And then this connective tissue are examples of how we're really trying to bring California together. And I like to use this example. This actually came from slides that High Speed Rail made. But if we go back a century, there was a mental map people had of California, at least those that were riding the train, because there weren't highways and other ways to get around California in the late 19th century, that were communities linked around rail. And so you go to downtown Stockton and Merced, Fresno, each of these places, there is a walkable core that was built out from the rail stations, and there were economies that were fundamentally intertwined. That was a mental map of California that people were aware of that really changed when we built I-5. And I think for people in the Bay Area and Southern California, Fresno, Bakersfield, Merced were off the mental map of California. We're sort of places you didn't pass through for those that were traveling up and down on the highway. And so that is, it's not that those places existed, they grew, they had their own issues, they had their own dynamism, and the people there very much had, those communities were part of the map, but a lot of people in California was off their map. And high-speed rail, in a sense, their map is about reconnecting those places. And to make it very tangible for how it would go, I was speaking with someone from a major Silicon Valley tech company a couple of days ago saying, well, when are you going to open your office in Fresno? And the answer was, well, when high-speed rail is finished and it's an hour away. And it's that, and it's not just, that's a tangible move that would be important in the economic future of that place, but it's also about the reality, the mental map changes because the actual physical related, you can have a meeting back and forth between communities when that kind of investment goes forward. And so Regions Rise Together has been trying to look at all these things that are happening, not inventing new things, but trying to kind of stitch it together as part of a story and really engage with each of these parts of California as very distinct places. And so what I wanted to just end with are some examples of what we're trying to do in 2020 going forward. We are trying to embed the work that is leveraging existing things happening. So first thing we're doing, changing the mental map of California. No, we are not proposing that California is indeed an island. This was an actual map for many years, but it's reflection of how if you have a mental map of a place, it really can affect your work negatively. But one specific thing, and GoBiz is working on this, is the idea of a second office, of really promoting to coastal companies that when they're looking to expand, to maybe consider inland California places, to consider Riverside, to consider Stockton, to consider Fresno. There are conversations that we are starting to have with companies that are looking to grow. So that's the kind of idea of you change your mental map, you see opportunity in a place you didn't before. Also related to that is kind of communicating some of the success stories that are starting to happen. There is an emerging entrepreneurship ecosystem in a lot of the communities in the Central Valley, and the story of Bitwise is really an interesting one, of a company that started in Fresno that had got a significant investment, Series A funding, to expand. They chose to expand to Bakersfield. And they chose to expand to Bakersfield in part because not a lot of other people are thinking about the tech opportunities there, and because it's going to be linked via high-speed rail to Fresno and to the rest of California. And so those kind of places, these emerging tech and entrepreneurship ecosystems in Fresno, in Bakersfield, in Modesto, in Merced, is really helping encourage that so people in other parts of California see opportunities there. And then the last piece sort of in the mental map is kind of really trying to encourage philanthropy to see opportunity again in parts of California where they haven't been. And there was an announcement at the California Economic Summit in November that $23 million had been secured from a whole series of foundations to invest in inland California. And that was the work of Kathleen Kelly-Janis and a number of us kind of making this broader case that had come through the last number of months. So that's sort of those are kind of tangible things on the mental map. And then just quickly on the kind of regions up, economic development planning that we're encouraging. There are initiatives in regions on economic development that have it ongoing, that are evolving. Sacramento has been involved with an economic prosperity strategy. The Inland Empire is involved with one. And then recently, the Fresno region came together around something called Drive, that in some ways I would argue was possible because of the investments from the TCC program. In Fresno, a whole series of relationships were formed, and then some leadership in the community and across a series of organizations came together and said, oh, the state's doing this Regions Rise Together. We want to get ourselves together and put forward a vision for investable projects that are going to transform our economy over time. And we are now starting, and they did that. They put together a very extensive plan. They met with the governor and framed it to the governor. I think it's been quite effective as an organizing principle for the community, as well as coming to some very, very specific ideas on what to work on, a K-16 collaborative and a partnership between Fresno State and UC Merced. It is now an inspiration to other regions in California about how to do regional economic planning. And looking forward, I think we're going to see this coming from other places, and we're already getting asked all the time, hey, we'd love to meet with you to share our vision for how we'd like to do something like that. And this is again, it's not the state doing the regional economic development planning, it's the state kind of creating an opening and a platform for how to do it, and working in partnership with organizations. Kern County is a place that we had some of our initial conversations as part of Regions Rise Together, and there's a kind of a network of people there that are really interested in a conversation about the future. And then just to close with this idea of the connective tissue between regions, we just heard quite a bit about that from the high-speed rail project, but one or two other ones that I think we're starting to think about. One is the structure of regional planning in California. We have Senate Bill 375, and there's kind of a lot of thought about how do we make that work. I think Secretary Crowfoot was talking about VMT reduction and sort of the importance of that, and I think we all know that that is a critical issue for the state. So that is also the Sustainable Community Strategy, SB 375, was really the most significant law around regional planning in California in a very long time. Where does that go next? And so we're involved in some of those conversations and want to be involved with people throughout the state. And Meg showed you this diagram as well, which is really the idea of supporting the station area planning and thinking about those nodes throughout California as very special places. And how do we align resources to make it happen? So in closing, this is really just a kind of chance to share a little bit about what we're doing. We are continuing to speak with a number of regions. There is a conference that Bill Higgins' organization is having in April in, I believe, in Riverside in the Inland Empire that's called Regions Rise Together. And we're going to continue to speak with and encourage regions to really come together around partnership. But I think to the extent we have time or something you can think about within your agencies is sort of how is your work promoting regionalism or strengthening regions or recognizing some of the distinctiveness between regions. And then also think about us as really not a very large team, but kind of a set of people between Kate and myself and others at GoBiz and some of the external organizations that are hearing from the regions about their desire to really promote a different vision of economic development that really puts equity, inclusive economic development, sustainability at the forefront. So with that, I will close and take any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. That presentation also has gotten better. I like that presentation too. Having seen all of these before. No, it was really good before, but it's getting better all the time. And thank you so much, Egan. And just to jump in a little bit, because we've been working together on this for a long time. And actually, I think Egan made that slide when he was at Spur that is now in the high-speed rail presentation and was also in this presentation. So it's like your work continues. One thing we've talked about a lot, as Egan was saying, there's sort of an inside game and an outside game. And one of the big questions, and it really is partly was inspired by something that Secretary Blumenfeld brought up at the first meeting we had this year, which is sort of how do we start thinking more regionally in terms of our own funding across agencies and aligning and having a kind of a more strategic approach, which led to the question of can we figure out how to do that in Fresno and Tahoe Basin? And it turns out to be really hard, as Louise said. So that's an ongoing question. So that alignment. But another thing that Egan didn't bring up that has been was brought up many times in these conversations around the state, and I'm bringing it up now because we have now a vacancy on this council, which is boards and commissions, and that disproportionately our boards and commissions are staffed by people from the Bay Area and from Los Angeles. And that to the extent we can start thinking about boards and commissions as places to also bring in different perspectives from different regions, that's an incredibly important goal for us all, I think, at the state level, and thinking through sort of how can we change that mental map for ourselves and the voices in the conversation that we're having, as well as changing it throughout. So I just wanted to raise that because it was another important point that we've talked about. Thoughts, questions, things to say? Come on, guys, get your energy back. No, Jenny.
So I will just say, because you brought up the Fresno region and Drive, and I think it's, stuff like that is very exciting, especially for us in the food and agricultural industry, to really thinking, what does ag look like for the future, and how can we as a region, them as a region, come together around really integrating agriculture and jobs for the future in a much more holistic way. So things like that are really exciting to us. I know it's gotten a lot of excitement, certainly in the region as well. And I think looking for those opportunities in agriculture, we've recently funded a study through UC Davis on what does ag look like in 2050, so that we as a department and probably as a state can really say, okay, well, what does ag look like in 2050, and how do we set ourselves up to support ag for 2050, not support ag from the past, but really looking forward. So I think that's a great example of it as well.
Great. And just one quick comment on that, which is I think what they're thinking about is how do they take the industry and really move up the value chain so they can get to quality jobs. I didn't say this, but that sort of implied we have a quality jobs challenge all over California, particularly in inland areas, and this is a way to...
Quality jobs is absolutely key, and it's looking at innovation, tech, food processing, that whole value chain, so that we're shifting the job trajectory upward.
Well, and Jenny, that's also a great mental map point in the food flows in the state, right? We think about water flows, food flows, oil and gas flows, whatever we think about that. These are still resources that are from middle of the state going to the coast of the state primarily. And how do we think about that mental map picture too? How do we think about those connections and innovation and production and the connections there? So that's a great point too. Yes, Amanda.
Thanks, Aegon. That was a great presentation. Just briefly, there's a number of ways that the Resources Agency thinks about things from a regional perspective. We just worked with a bunch of folks on this council on the water resilience portfolio, just on climate resilience broadly. We have biodiversity regions in California, so this is a way of thinking that's not unfamiliar to us, but I am very interested, given your engagement with local and regional entities across the state, to kind of flip the question back on you and ask, what have you heard that you think we need to hear that maybe we wouldn't come up with ourselves? In other words, where are we not aligning ourselves and where can we do better? I'd love to, without throwing any of us under the bus, of course.
I'll do two things. One needs more investigation, and the other one is specific. We hear a lot, well, you can't do one size fits all in California. We're different from these other places. You have these state goals, but we're quite different. I think that's true to an extent, but I think you got to drill underneath and be, well, really, to what extent would changing that policy affect your region differently? But that's something you hear a lot of, and that would depend on a variety of things. The other one that we heard a bit about is that in applying for state funding, it can be difficult, and there's many different agencies and criteria and programs and funding, and if there's a way to better align that, would be easier. Similarly, then that's sort of bottom up of someone being able to access funds more easily, but then I think also from the state perspective, how can we align the funding towards places in a way that's really transformative? And we know that TCC is an example of really trying to do that, but that's sort of, I think, kind of going back and forth. Certainly other ones as well, but kind of two, say, jump out.
Yeah, I would say just having been at many of these, funding is the big one, honestly. There's a couple things. There's funding alignment, and I know this is really hard, so I'm saying it knowing how hard it is, but messaging alignment, just what are our actual goals on big things? So people point, for instance, to the Sustainable Freight Action Plan, which was an interagency document, and people find it very helpful that it exists because it's a thing that's out there that's interagency that people can look at and say, oh, that's where we're trying to get on this issue. And so we've heard a lot about just the need for that, sort of being able to figure out sort of where are we generally trying to head. And so I think that's something we've all been working on a lot in this group up here and also with Regions Rise. And then the thing about our voices being heard. And I will tell you the fact that we've gone to these places and actually engaged with people outside of Sacramento is really valuable. Just highly recommend people getting out of Sacramento and going places because that alone has been a huge benefit of the program. But thanks, that's a really good question. Other questions or comments from up here? And I know we have a public comment. Julia Jordan is in the back. I was going to say, you got to comment on something, Julia. This is your time.
Thank you very much.
Our stalwart member of the public who comes to all of these events. Aegon, you might get called on to answer this question, so just hang out.
No, I just wanted to make a quick comment, hopefully quick comment. And I'm glad to see this topic at SGC at a meeting. And I think it's important to be talking about different regions and thinking about equitable growth and looking at kind of what you called the mental map and places that maybe we haven't been thinking about as intensively. And just, yeah, thank you for the presentation. And I just wanted to add that, I think for leadership, sorry, I didn't even introduce myself, Julia Jordan, Leadership Council. And I think we really strongly believe that for Regions Rise, any approach to economic development, both in the Valley and the rest of the state, should be reflecting, California's climate and equity goals, as well as resilience goals, while kind of looking towards these economic development aims. And, I think the development of concepts and programs and specific kinds of incentives and funding associated with Regions Rise should be inclusive of existing communities in those regions. that are a part of this vision and fully incorporate strategies that long-term are not going to sacrifice public health, climate, livable and complete communities, and racial justice for the sake of economic growth. So making sure that those things are really integrated in kind of the approach and communication around this kind of initiative and the specific programs that come out of it. And to really have a transformative and equitable impact in the Valley and beyond, we do have to be thinking about developing quality, long-lasting jobs while equally valuing those climate objectives in this process. And being kind of careful and really smart about how investments do or do not directly benefit current residents in those regions, including low-income communities and those who've been really historically left out of development decisions over time, and who are impacted by development and currently impacted by really heavy industry. So I appreciated sort of the highlighting of inequity across regions, and also would urge you to think about the inequities within regions and ensuring that in moving forward that those are really kind of highlighted in the initiatives. So just looking forward to kind of seeing where this goes with the conversation with the council, and looking forward to seeing some transparent and really inclusive processes in developing specific region-wise initiatives and programs. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Julia, and thanks as always for all the work you do to push those goals forward across the state. And I think, Julia made a really good point. In some ways, it's a good way to close out the meeting. But first of all, thanks so much to Egon, who has done just enormous amount of work. He really is the only full-time staff person on Regions Rise. And so it's really an unbelievable amount of work that's happened. So thank you. Julia brought up, and I think it's, we started by saying that in this administration, really climate has become sort of an integrated approach that really crosses every agency and every sector and every region. And to some extent, thinking regionally is also that, right? How do we think regionally, and how do we bring that to every agency and every sector and every part of the state and sort of change that mental map? And just to Julia's point, this whole idea that the governor is really focused on, which is this idea of high road jobs, which are jobs that have career ladders and are family supporting and do have sort of benefits and local hire opportunities and really are inclusive, is also something that he's trying to bring to every agency and every part of the administration. And so I think what we're starting to see, and you're starting to see in this administration, I hope, is just a kind of an integration of all of these values across sort of everything we do. And that really is, ultimately SGC is such a great locus for that, because it brings together people who are trying to do that in many, many different ways, and learning about how those values can be kind of incorporated and how we can all do better, which is why I think we all like it. And we all value each other and all of you and so much. So I don't have any public comment cards for the end of public comment. So I just wanted to say thank you again to Louise and the SGC staff, who are just a joy to work with. And really, thank you for everything you've done this year and continue to do. And everyone who stuck it out, I'm very impressed by all of you. Yeah, exactly. And with that, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, guys. Oh, thank you. I love all those programs.
Thank you again. And also, I'm sorry to be sitting